Welcome to Proles of the Roundtable.
Hello and welcome to Pros of the Roundtable, where we sit down, have a few drinks, and talk leftist history. Check out our new website at prolespod.com, where you can find our back catalog, links to all the resources we talk about, and a whole communist ebook library. If you want to support us even more, check out our Patreon, where you can give your hard-earned wages to authoritarian communist podcasts in exchange for bonus episodes, clothes, and buttons. Find out more at patreon.com/prolespod. We wanted to thank this episode's primary sponsor, who enabled us to buy this fancy round table. Big thanks to our sponsor, the House of Representatives of the United States.
Thanks, guys. Could you get back to work? We really need some cool things.
Hey, they just started. Didn't you see?
Does that mean I can get my tax returns?
Waiting.
Womp womp.
Thanks. Okay, today with us we have Jeremy, Ethan, and Taylor, and myself, Ezra. I'm drinking. Jesus Christ, this is the first time I'm drinking on this, on an episode.
Oh, it's going to get silly.
Gonna get real silly. And I'm drinking White Claw hard seltzer. So it's seltzer water, but with alcohol in it.
Like extra spicy LaCroix.
So extra spicy. That's what. And I'm spilling already. Wow.
It's the Patreon bonus version of La Croix.
Yep.
Okay. How about you, Jeremy?
I am drinking Victoria, which is a Mexican lager.
I'm Ethan, and I'm drinking Red Stripe, which is a Jamaican lager.
And I'm Taylor, and I'm drinking some Dale's Pale Ale that's just been sitting in the fridge for a couple months.
Is that a DPA?
Yeah, sure.
It technically is a DPA.
Awesome.
So, Ethan, do you want to tell us what we're talking about today?
So I'm going to be telling y'all a little bit about Paul Robeson, who, has anyone heard of him?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Okay.
for sure.
So I hadn't heard of him until like a year or two ago, which is wild to me because as you'll find out when I'm talking about it, he was there was a period where he was probably the most famous person in the world. And there's a reason that he's not as well known. And I'm going to tell you what that reason is when we get there.
Does it have something to do with communism?
It has a lot to do with
Oh, shit,
communism
okay.
and our sponsor, the House of Representatives.
Cool.
Yeah, so we're talking about Paul Robeson.
Do you want to start with his like introduction? Yeah, go.
Oh, okay.
Give us a little background, Ethan.
Okay, well, so so I've got it laid out like chronologically, because it's history. So I'll just start at the beginning. Yeah, so actually I'll start before the beginning. So
Whoa. Well, hang on. How do you do that?
Galaxy brain.
Galaxy brain.
No, so he was born in 1898 to William Drew and Louisa Robeson. And so his dad, William, he was born a slave, like born into slavery in North Carolina. But when he was 15 years old, he escaped and he went to the North and became a laborer for the Union Army during the Civil War. But he snuck back to the plantation at least twice to like see his mom.
Shit.
But like, so he was just very good at.
Makes me feel bad about all the times I've avoided seeing my mother.
As you should.
Yikes. Yikes. Call your parents unless they're shitty, then I guess don't. But but so then William, he became a Presbyterian minister. And then so Louisa, she was a teacher, and she died when Paul was 6 because she got burned by a coal that fell off the stove.
Holy shit.
Because 1904, like a coal fell on her dress, lit it on fire, and she died.
That's unreal.
Yeah.
Jesus.
It was bad. Paul Robeson, he grew up in Princeton, New Jersey, which he later said it may as well have been like a southern plantation. It was so fucking racist, which I've never been.
That's where Princeton, the college is, right? Like the Ivy League school is in Princeton, New Jersey?
Yes, you are correct.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So he grew up in Princeton, and yeah, he said it was just ridiculous, like just hyper racist. Like I'm sure most places in the U.S. were and are, but yeah, that one.
Yeah, it's weird how a nation founded on capitalist white supremacy might be racist for its
Capitalist and white
entire
supremacist.
fucking existence.
So he went to Rutgers University for college, and he was the first black man on Rutgers football team.
Shit.
Oh, it's something I should have said earlier. I'm going to be quoting from a lot of people through this time, and they use the word Negro a lot. And so, like, we don't use that word these days, but, like, when I'm quoting them, I'm just, that's what they said, so I'm going to do it just because I don't want to, like, change their words. So, yeah, so anyway, so he was the first black man on Rutgers football team, and he was very good.
No.
Although his sophomore year he was playing and they benched him because an opposing team refused to share the field with a black man.
No shit.
Yeah.
All right, what team was it? Call him out.
I couldn't find it. I
God
looked.
damn
It
it.
was a Southern team. It was from a Southern college. I looked. I couldn't find it.
It's probably Auburn University or something.
Say Auburn. Yeah.
Fucking
Fuck Auburn.
University of Alabama.
Yeah, it was. I looked. I couldn't find which one, but it was some like deep South university. Yeah, they were so fucking racist they wouldn't play.
Damn.
So yeah, so he graduated college. He ended up enrolling at Columbia Law School, because he was planning on being a lawyer. And so in 1921, he met. So at Columbia, I'm pretty sure it was at Columbia. He met and married as Landa Good. Her nickname was Essie. They were married until she died, so I'll refer to her a bunch.
Okay.
And she would eventually basically become like his manager and try to improve him a lot. She was like, because we have like her journals and letters and stuff, and she's like, he's really lazy and he sleeps in way too late, and like so he would just like wear when they first got married, he would just buy a pair of shoes, like the biggest pair of shoes he could find, and then he would just wear those shoes until holes ripped in them. Then he would buy another pair. But so by the end of this cycle, like he looked really trashy, and she was like, "That's not gonna work." So, yeah. Anyway, so he was in law school, and to make money, he played pro football for the Milwaukee Badgers. And there was the most famous football commenter of the time. I didn't write his name down because who cares? This was in the 20s. But he described Paul Robeson as the greatest defensive end in the history of football.
I think his name was Skippy McCool or something like
Yeah, that was it. No, but so yeah, he was just playing football to like pay the bills, and he was said to be one of the if not the best at that position at the time.
Nice.
So, and he's in law school. Like, this is wild. And he also had a few like singing gigs here and there, and like choirs, and like with a couple little musical plays, things like that, because he liked singing. And
Got to bring theater into this.
this guy, we're gonna be talking
I
about
know.
so much motherfucking theater. It's gonna be great.
Ethan just got like the laser eyes.
Real shit. No, but so speaking of his speaking of
Laser
laser eyes, yeah. So his first professional gig was in I want to say like 22. He was in a play called Taboo, which opened in New York, and he was he got rave reviews, and like they moved the show over to London, where they renamed it Voodoo.
Oh,
It was that kind of
Okay.
play, yeah. But he kept receiving all these like rave reviews, and they toured around the United Kingdom, and everyone was like, "This guy's amazing." And so his time in England, it was interesting because he wrote later. He's like, "Yeah, that really started to show me how bad racism was in the U.S. in particular, because it wasn't. He didn't think it was as bad in the U.K. He didn't find it as bad in the U.K." Yeah, and so he toured the UK with this play, and he began what he called a lifelong friendship with the British people. So,
nice.
Good work, UK.
For being relatively less racist.
For
than the
being
US.
less racist in the US.
In your country, not necessarily outside of it. as
Right,
much,
yeah.
but-
Yeah, I mean there was all kinds of colonialism happening. So 23, he graduates from Columbia Law School, and he gets a job at a law firm. But he quits like within a year because after one of the secretaries at this law firm wouldn't type up one of his letters because he was black.
Jesus
Fun.
Christ.
Yeah, and so he was like, "Fuck law, I'm out of here."
Okay.
That's like that would obviously like damage the law firm more than it would Paul, right? Like it's just like, oh, I'm not going to type this, like this important thing that like has to go out for. That's just fucking wild.
Yeah, I don't know. 1924, the director of Taboo approaches Eugene O'Neill, who's a famous playwright, famous Irish playwright, and he said, "Hey, I got this guy. He's a black guy. If you have any roles for black guys, you gotta put this guy in one of your plays. He's great." And so Robeson, he ends up playing the main role in O'Neill's play All God's Chillin' Got Wings,
Ooh.
which is about an interracial marriage.
Oh shit.
And so in the play, like Robeson kissed the white lead actress's hand, and so people were like scandalized and like picketing the theaters. And there were letters like, "What the hell are you putting on? Like, what kind of plays are you doing?" Yeah, the theater was picketed, and Robeson said he was always scared to come out of the theater.
So what year was this?
24.
Okay, so
He's 26 years old. Yeah.
It's kind of interesting because it wasn't until the late 1910s that sort of thing became taboo, because in early movies there were scenes of like interracial relationships, and it was around the time of Birth of a Nation, which was reflective of sort of the fears of white people, and that's why this movie got made, to sort of lionize the Klan and whatever. But it was around that time that these standards and practices started being put into place in Hollywood that said you couldn't have miscegenation even implied in a movie. And so you had all these weird situations like, I forget the fucking movie, but there was an Asian man who was cast to be in this movie. And then they cast a white woman to be in the movie. And then they had to boot him from the project to put a white man in yellowface into it because they couldn't have. Yeah, but that sort of thing actually was not in like early cinema. Like it was allowed, and then in like the late 1910s and early 1920s, the U.S. shifted again back toward racism. So,
well, I mean, like Birth of a Nation was it's credited as one of the things that helped bring the Ku Klux Klan back
from death, basically.
Exactly.
It was gone
after Reconstruction. Yeah. So see you in hell, D.W. Griffith. Yeah, so 1925, the next year, Eugene O'Neill was like, "Wow, this guy was awesome. I want to revive one of my big plays, which was called The Emperor Jones, which was a story about a guy who goes like to some Caribbean nation and like takes over and but it was almost a one-man show, like just a couple characters. It was like really it was a great vehicle to showcase like a black actor. The guy who originated it was a revival. Because the play they'd done the play in 1920 with this guy named Charles Gilpin, who was probably the most famous black actor of the time. And it's weird. So Gilpin wanted to cut out a few uses of the N-word from the play, but Eugene O'Neill was like, "No, it's justified." So it was weird. Yeah, but so they revived this play with Paul Robeson playing the part. No, so it is interesting. In the play, his character is supposed to whistle at one point, but Robeson couldn't whistle. So he was like, "Can I just sing?" And the director was like, "Yeah, I guess." So he sang in this part that a ton of people were seeing, and it helped people realize like, "Oh shit, this guy's really good at singing."
Yeah.
Because he just had this beautiful bass voice. Yeah, they did a film version that was not very successful. Robeson didn't like it. Yeah, but so at this point he meets with Alexander Koyransky, who was a collaborator of Stanislavski, who, if you don't know anything about theater, Stanislavski is, he's probably the most important theorist in terms of coming up with, like for actors, coming up with, like he codified how actors prepare themselves for roles, like what goes into acting. So Koyransky was a collaborator of his, like helped him write Stanislavski's books, and he gave Robeson acting lessons. And that was huge. So yeah, he started blowing up. So he's doing these plays. I think they moved Emperor Jones over to London as well. He started blowing up, and so Paul and Essie, they commuted back and forth between New York and London like frequently, but they had a home base in London. They had this really lavish house. They had like servants. And then in 1925, he gave a concert in Harlem.
That would make Hyder proud.
What?
Having white servants in your...
I can't wait to have a white slave.
Yeah. Fucking guy.
God damn. No, so he gave a concert in Harlem in 1925 where he was, what he said, he was the first Negro to give an all-Negro presentation of music on the formal concert stage. Like he was mixing in black spirituals as well as popular, like secular songs. And that was, I'm just gonna be listing a bunch of like accomplishments because this guy was wild. And so while he was in London, he met Emma Goldman, who is a famous anarchist. And
Famous racist.
she liked Paul Robeson.
Did she like Mao as well?
Well, there is some rumor that she may have slept with Mao.
Wasn't she like 30 years older than Mao?
I don't know. I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know.
It may be complete, like, apocryphal bullshit, but
Yeah.
there is some story that happened.
So anyway, he met, so this is the early 20s, he meets Emma Goldman, and they talked a lot about the Soviet Union, which had just started popping off. And she was a very vocal critic of the Soviet Union, as you might imagine an anarchist would be. And he started meeting other, like, radical writers and playwrights they introduced him to like socialism and the Soviet Union, and they started, yeah. So the seeds were being planted in like the mid 20s. So he got invited on behalf of the Prince of Wales to give a performance. He was like singing for the royals. He was giving concerts, and ambassadors and dignitaries would come backstage afterwards to greet him. He was blown up. So 1927, he's in this movie called Showboat, which was like a groundbreaking musical. The plot's really dumb, but most musicals before this point had like just very basic plots and then just songs that didn't have anything to do with the plot. Like the plot was basically a framing device for like, well, we just need an excuse to put a bunch of songs in here. But Showboat was the first one where they were like, what if the songs advance the plot and have like character information? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Broadway changed forever.
Literally, though. And so his character, he had a song called Old Man River, which was his, like, if any song was, like, his signature, it was that one. He sang it all throughout the entire rest of his life. And he would change the lyrics a lot to fit, like, the times. But, yeah, he sang that song forever. Yeah, and so at this point, some people called him the most famous, like, black person in the world. He was viewed as definitely the most famous, like, dispossessed person in a powerful country. So he started getting contacted by all kinds of people in that situation, like dispossessed people in, like, powerful countries. So, like, one example was this guy from the Australian Aboriginal Progressive League. He wrote him a letter. He was like, "We're having a hard time fighting with the white folk. You should visit Australia." He did later. He didn't respond to this one, or I don't know if he responded. He just didn't make it out to Australia for that. But and so at this point, London was starting to develop some of the like explicit segregation and racism, like excluding black folks from hotels and restaurants, because a lot of U.S. tourists were starting to come over to London, and they were like,
Jesus Christ,
we got to get more racist,
right? Yeah,
to cater to these people. So he started like in his writings, like you start seeing, he's like, what the fuck's going on here? Like, I thought this place was better.
right.
So we get to 1930, and Robeson, he plays Othello. In the Shakespeare play Othello, he plays the lead, the title character, and he was the first black actor to play Othello in almost 100 years, I think.
Jesus.
Because, like, this play was done all the time, but it was white dudes in blackface.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because if you're not familiar with Othello, the plot is he's like this dark-skinned man, like written as a Moor.
Right.
He's in Venice, so he's like the only dark-skinned person there, and it's about like that situation, being in that situation. And so he played it. Everyone was like, this is amazing. And what's wild is they have recording. It's not of this production, but there is a recording. I think you can hear it on Spotify. You can probably find it on YouTube. They recorded a production of Othello. You can hear him.
Yeah.
Like you can hear the production. That's
pretty awesome.
Yeah, you can hear his beautiful, rich voice. It's amazing.
I pray you in your letters, when you shall these unlucky deeds relate, speak of me as I am. Nothing extenuate, nor set down aught in malice.
So he was shattering records, like box office records in Othello. But then he realized, like, I could not play this role in the U.S. because, like, he had to kiss a white woman, like he had to hug a white woman. Like he realized.
Isn't the whole thing about there's a large and it's been years since I've read Othello, but there's like adultery, right? Like he sleeps with like an Italian like prince's wife or something. Isn't that like
No, so the thing with Othello is that he suspects his wife of sleeping with this other guy,
Oh.
Yes.
but it's an
It's all
underling of his
bullshit.
who's
Yeah.
trying
It's
to
Iago
bring him
is-
down. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Oh, okay.
So no, and then he ends up like killing her and then killing himself. Yeah, it's typical Shakespeare. But no, but it's a powerful.
Bill.
What?
Oh,
Oh,
I
Bill.
just said, oh,
Yeah.
Bill.
It's a powerful, like, dignified role for black actors. And he was saying, he later said he attributed a lot of his like understanding of of white supremacy and that experience of it to playing Othello and having to and he found a lot of meaning in Shakespeare's words about his experience 300, 400 years later. So yeah, almost universal acclaim. Like, it was legendary. He played Othello like so many times throughout his life. Like, he played it in his 60s because he was the most legendary person to play the role. Yeah. So his main hobbies were reading and learning languages. He would spend hours a day listening to language tapes and learning different words. He was fluent in so English, French, German, Spanish, Chinese, Afik, which is an African language, and Yiddish. And then he was like, his quote is, "I'm polishing my Hebrew, Norwegian, Czech, Greek, Latin, Portuguese, and Swahili."
Jesus Christ.
Oh
Yeah.
my god.
My man.
Meanwhile, I can barely speak English. So, but and then Russian. He actually said he felt the most fluent in Russian, and he liked it the best of any language, like more than English. He said Russian is just the most like musical and beautiful language to me. And so yeah, so he's traveling around a lot, giving some concerts, and he starts talking to these various people who bring him to the left and introduce him to socialism. So he had a friend
Hey
named
kid, you want to try some socialism? That's how we all got here, right?
Pretty much.
Hey, I got some good Lenin in the back.
Some dude on the street opens up his coat and it's just like copies of books.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah. No, but so he had a friend named William L. Patterson. He was the leader of the International Labor Defense, which was like a legal representation fund for like unions, labor organizers, communists. And he was a communist. And so he became friends with Paul Robeson. He was like, "Hey, man, you got to check this socialism thing out." But yeah, and so he started meeting all kinds of other people. C.L.R. James, he wrote The Black Jacobins about Haiti, like the seminal book on that. He met Kwame Nkrumah, who was the first prime minister of Ghana. He met Jomo Kenyatta, who was like a big Kenyan. I don't know if he was a prime minister, but like a freedom fighter. Joshua Nkomo, who was the Zimbabwe African People's Union. He helped free Zimbabwe. Like I think he was Mugabe's vice president for a long time. And then he met Jawaharlal Nehru, who was like a freedom fighter in India. So India was like controlled by Britain at this point, but Nehru was a big I think he was like a colonial official, but also was trying to break away from Britain. Anyway, and he became close friends with Paul and his wife. And so while he was in London, he met a lot of African exiles and started learning all their stories and like tried to learn their languages. So at the University of London, he was taking classes in the School of Oriental and African Studies, like starting to realize what colonialism was and how it functioned, and started tying that back to the plight of black people in the U.S. And so, yeah, he started realizing like he couldn't just keep living in London and avoiding the struggle of black people in the U.S. So, and it's around this time he started to support the little place called the Soviet Union.
What?
Hell yeah.
And the way he came to support the Soviet Union was because they were one of the only large powers. I mean, like, they weren't that powerful at this point, but like they were one of the largest countries in the world that had an anti-colonial stance, and he like an official stance of anti-colonialism. And he was like, "Well, shit, I gotta check that out."
But a lot of internet anarchists told me that the Soviet Union was actually part of red colonial, like red imperialism.
Red imperialism.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So I don't know if I can believe
I mean,
anything that
no,
this
I
person's
mean,
saying.
it's yeah. I mean, we joke, but people be out here in 2019 thinking that. Like, here's,
Yeah, I had like a teacher last semester who told my class, not just me. I was
Yeah.
part of the class.
Directly.
Yeah, directly at me.
They're like, Ezra, heads up.
Yeah, no, exactly. Oh, it was so bad.
yeah, no. I mean, I'll talk. We'll get there in a little bit, but he had politics that were so much better than like 95% of internet communists, like contemporary internet communists.
That's not difficult.
No, well,
let's be
unfortunately
frank.
not. Yeah. But so he said in 1933 and 34, he was speaking at a meeting in London, and he said this black guy got up just in the back of the meeting and was like, hey, don't you understand that the basic problem of all the stuff we're talking about is the problem of the working class in Africa? Why don't you go to Africa and check it out? And why don't you follow what's going on in the Soviet Union? Just this random guy. Like, he didn't say who he was. I don't know that we know who that guy was, but he was like, go check out Google Soviet Union.
And that man's name? Albert Einstein.
Einstein was friends with Robeson, actually, which is fun. So he's like, okay, fine. I'll go to the Soviet Union. So so Christmas 1934, he actually... So in Christmas 1934, he actually had an invitation from Sergei Eisenstein, who you'll recognize from a previous episode on Soviet cinema.
Maybe you've heard of him.
Yeah, like the quintessential Soviet filmmaker. He had an invitation, and so he took his wife and he had a son at this point, Paul Jr., Paulie, as he was referred to. He took his whole family and they went to Moscow. But they had to stop in Germany on the way there because you can't just fly because they didn't have they hadn't invented planes yet. No, it's like air travel was not as widespread. So they had to stop in Germany, and they actually had some encounters with the brand new Nazis that helped drive home. Like there were Eslanda, she wrote later that she was like, that was the first time I really like felt how how black people in the deep South must feel, like how we were treated by those German soldiers. So this was on the way to Moscow. And Paul, he said, I realized that the suffering of my own people was related to the sufferings of equally oppressed minorities. And so he visited Moscow. He was there right in the middle of the purges, which he wrote a little bit about. His own stance was that the purges were largely necessary to get rid of fascists and prepare for confrontation with other fascists in Europe, but some communists in the U.S. disagreed with him and got mad at him.
Trots, you mean? Like, honestly, who gives a fuck about Trots?
Robeson didn't. He tells this story. He was at the Bolshoi Ballet with his son, and the audience, like, they noticed that Stalin was in the audience, like, watching this ballet, and like I don't know if he'd tried to like if Stalin had tried to sneak in or something. But someone was like,
typical communist not paying for the show that he's going to see. Fuck.
Was he displeased with the performance and had the entire group killed? Is that
no? So they the audience. Someone was like, "Oh shit, Stalin's in here!" And everyone started applauding and like cheering for Stalin in the middle of this ballet performance. And Paul Robeson was like, "Yeah, it was great. I was lifting up my son so that he could see him and wave to this great leader."
That's so cool.
Yeah, he wrote about Stalin's kindness. He was like, "This is a guy who was a leader who was wise and good," is what he was saying.
bless?
So they were, they put their son. They were like, the Soviet Union rules. So they put their son, Paul. They put him in a Moscow school. They were like, he's just going to go to school in Russia now, because their kid was already like at least bi or trilingual. Like he knew German, probably a little Russian. So they put him in a Moscow school, which was the same school that Stalin's daughter and Molotov's son were in. Yeah, and like They left him there. I don't mean like they dropped him off and they just booked it.
They yeet him
They were
to
like,
him.
peace.
It was like, I mean, it was
one
like,
child down. I feel that deeply as a father. I could just be like, yo, sorry, son, I'm going to leave you in this school in the middle
We're
of
going
nowhere.
to send you to Moscow.
Peace.
no, it was like a boarding school situation, but oh, amazing. No, but so he actually met up with this guy William Patterson, who like he showed him around Moscow, he introduced him to all these officials and Soviet like culture and like life, and was just showing him around. But Robeson writes about talking to all these just random Russian people who were like very excited. They're like, "Oh, you speak Russian so well." They were just amazed at how well he spoke Russian. And they were both Robeson and Aslanda. They wrote about their quote astonishment at the complete lack of color consciousness.
Damn.
Like Robeson later said multiple times that direct quote, "The Soviet Union was the first place I felt like a human being."
Shit.
Jesus.
Just because like the I mean like the Soviet Union in the 30s, obviously it had issues, but like for people who had lived in the United States and the United Kingdom, the amount of difference they felt being black in that society was so minimal. They were like, they see us, they felt the most just like part of the society they were in, of any place they'd been to, and they'd visited all sorts of countries.
Right.
So just a kind of a little cool little thing. But so he was hanging out with Eisenstein, and actually it renewed his commitment to filmmaking. He was like, "Yeah, I want to do some fucking movies. It's gonna be good." And so his time in Moscow really helped him commit to the idea of revolutionary socialism, and encouraged him to go. I got to go back to the U.S. We got to fight Jim Crow, and he came to communism because of communism's anti-fascism and anti-colonialism, and then became like a huge ass communist.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah, and he was starting to form this theory of music that was tied in with his ideas of socialist internationalism. Like he was saying that, like he would give concerts, and anywhere he would go, he would sing songs in the native language of that place, and then talk and then connect it to the songs of other places, and was using it as an example of saying like trying to find the commonalities of music to unite the working class of the world. So he gets back to the U.S. and he starts doing plays with like anti-racist themes. He starts doing pro-worker plays, pro-union plays. He would share his dressing room with the rest of the cast. Like as a leading man, he was entitled to his own dressing room, but he would just go in the same dressing room with everyone else. And he would sweep the theater afterwards.
Damn.
Yeah, like it was a real one. He was in a play about Toussaint Louverture, the
Haitian.
the guy who led the Haitian Revolution, written by C.L.R. James, who wrote again the Black Jacobins.
Nice.
And then in 1935, he was in a movie called Sanders of the River. So
Unfamiliar.
good. So this film ended up. So he was playing like a African tribesman in a loincloth and shit. And so I don't know what happened here, because the film ended up being pretty anti-colonial, and it made a lot of people mad at him. And then he actually saw the movie and he was like, "This sucks." And he was pissed and condemned it. There's a story of him like storming out of the premiere, because I don't know what happened. I don't know if he just got like fucked in the editing or what, but everyone was like, "That's racist as fuck." And he was really embarrassed, and it sucked because it made a lot of money. And he tried to buy the print so that he could destroy it, but it was making too much money, so the studio wouldn't sell it.
Amazing.
Yeah, it sucked. And it kind of turned him off of filmmaking, because he was like, if you're just going to edit this shit, fuck it. So he didn't want to do a ton of films. Before he'd filmed that, but it came out the year after, he did a film of Showboat, where he won acclaim for his performance and like his singing, and it spread all over the world because people who hadn't been able to see Showboat were able to hear him sing. He's great. I'll That'll be the outro. Will just be like a half hour of Paul Robeson song.
Just a medley,
Yeah,
a
exactly.
Broadway medley of Paul
good.
Robeson songs.
Yeah, and so at this point, he's really interested in doing revolutionary anti-colonial stories, like in films and plays, but you can't get them funded because at that point, and I mean, it's kind of still the same way now, the only way you're going to get funding for a big movie or like a big production of a play is if they're going to, like, you got to get capital behind it. And if
Sure.
you're trying to do like communist shit,
It's not going to
it's a
happen.
little questionable.
Oh, so that new Netflix show with there's got to be some capital behind that. Definitely not a
Russian.
revolutionary figure.
So, although again, I like in watching that ending thing, I interpreted that goofy ass ending scene as him attempting to stop the progress of the Soviet Union and him just
Yeah.
getting run over.
Run over.
So I don't know that it. I don't know. Maybe I need to watch the whole fucking thing. But
How many episodes is it?
8. Yeah, so anyway. Yeah.
moving on.
So anyway, so he couldn't get funding, so he did more concerts because he could put together. Everyone wanted to hear him sing, and he could put together like whatever selection of songs he want. Plus, he could talk in between the songs. He could spew his communist back on his communist soapbox like the whole time. But he was such a good singer, such a good performer. Like everyone would come see him. So, and it's about this time he started giving like regular interviews to the Daily Worker in the U.S. Yeah, he had a quote: "The USSR is the only country in the world where I feel at home," which is, yeah. And so he wasn't a member of the Communist Party, which is probably a good idea just career-wise, but he was a member of the Friends of the Soviet Union,
Oh, okay.
Nice.
which is not the Communist Party. So, yeah.
Cuter. I like the Friends of the Soviet Union better than.
So, yeah, the Friends of the Soviet Union had started, it was a relief organization raising money for the famines.
Okay. The Volga famine,
What? No, the
The
Ukraine famine.
the one that didn't
Stop.
happen.
The Holodomor.
The one that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Okay.
It didn't exist
No,
by the time.
I mean, a famine happened, but it was just
Well,
because the
there were like
clouds-
low crop yields.
Yeah,
and, yes,
exactly.
and people were
exactly.
hungry. But,
yeah, exactly. So they were raising money for that. Anyway,
Gotcha.
but Friends of the Soviet Union, it was like hey, the Soviet Union's cool. We advocate for this, and we print like a pro-Soviet newspaper. So anyway, he was part of that. 1937, he gives $1,500, which at the time, I don't know how much that was. There was a lot of money to start something called the Council on African Affairs, which was an organization really devoted to like Pan-African like education and political agitation and advocacy, like just really anti-colonial, African solidarity in 1937. He went to Spain to sing for the Republicans. Those are the good ones, right?
Yeah.
I know jack shit about the Spanish Civil War.
It's a mixed bag. Like it, I mean, it was literally like so
non-fascist
many
side.
different.
Yeah,
right, there were
they
so
were the
many different
non-fascist.
factions.
Okay, so he went over to join the non-fascist.
There were like trots, and there were
No, I know,
anarchists,
there were a lot
and
of
there
people
were
there.
labor leaders, and there were
I wish
Stalinists.
I wish Stalin like personally hadn't tanked the Spanish Civil War.
right because it was definitely his fault directly. He was going around just like punching anarchists all day long, which
No, but
Girl, me too, though.
But so he went to Spain to sing, and they piped his songs over the loudspeakers so the whole city could hear, like both sides. Not like I want to entertain them too, but like we're gonna be singing like communist songs, and they're gonna have to listen to them.
noise.
yeah.
So hell yeah. Yeah, so 1939. So this is what I was saying earlier. 1939. He had enough understanding of like global politics that this thing called the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact happens. The
Red Brown Alliance.
yeah, exactly. The Stalin-Hitler Pact.
Jesus.
Yeah. No, but so at the time, like there were a lot of people in the U.S. who were like, "What does this mean? Why would Stalin do this?" And Robeson, like he wrote that it, quote, "in no way whatsoever weakened or changed his convictions," because he was saying that it was basically forced on Russia because the British and the French governments refused to collaborate with the USSR in a real policy of collective security,
Right.
which is
Stalin
true.
fucking begged Churchill to open up a front.
He was
going to
give Stalin was going to commit 1 million troops
Yes, to opening an Eastern Front.
Exactly.
If Churchill would commit to opening a Western Front, and Churchill just was like, "Oh yeah, bro," and then was like radio silent for
Yeah.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
what a
So anyway,
fucking
I
asshole.
can't believe we're talking about this. We have to talk
Again.
about this 80 years.
Again.
It's so stupid. What about the multi-route? Listen, Paul Robeson could understand it while it was happening. We have 80 years of like hindsight. You also
Right.
can understand
Yeah,
it.
the
Read
fact that the
fucking
Nazis
book.
nearly rolled over Moscow means that any and all time bought was fucking necessary.
Yeah,
so.
exactly. So, but the onset of war in Europe made them not be able to go back to the Europe. They're like, well, we gotta stay in. We gotta go back. We gotta stay in the U.S. for a while until this war shit ends. But before he left, he filmed this film called Proud Valley in Wales, and it was about a black miner working in a Welsh coal mine, with Welsh miners. And that was from all accounts, it was a good movie. I haven't seen it. I'm sure you can find it, but it was apparently just a very good portrayal of like a working class black guy in the UK. Yeah. But then so he gets to the US and he's in a movie called Tales of Manhattan, which once again like it was not great. Like
Okay.
it was a lot of like stereotypes and shit. And so Robeson was like he said later, I realized like halfway through what kind of movie they were making. So I don't know if he just like wasn't reading the scripts or what was going on. He was like, I realized halfway through and I was gonna try and like steer it away and change it, but I wasn't able to do that. And so people like black newspapers were like, man, this fucking guy is like, he's betraying us. Yeah, that's so he felt bad. But the thing with the Sanders of the River, after he couldn't buy the rights, he spent all of the money that he got from it giving scholarships and loans to African students. So,
Okay.
I mean, he tried something to make up for it, I guess. No, but so after he moved to the U.S., like all through World War II, he was a powerful face of anti-fascism in the U.S. Like anytime he was doing a concert, public appearance, he was like talking shit about the Nazis, talking shit about fascism, and boosting the Soviet Union, saying like the Soviet Union, they're real as fuck, like they're great. We need to it's good that we're allied with them. We should stay allied with them. They're fighting for freedom in the world. And so
How many Hearst newspapers wrote hit pieces on Paul Robeson?
most of them. Well, I mean, wait, just
Oh,
wait.
God.
It gets rough. And then so in 1942 he started. So at this point, most concerts throughout the U.S. were like concert seating was segregated. Like you had the black section over here and then the white section over here.
Sure.
And so in 1942 he was like,
It's probably more like the white section up here and the black section
yeah, you're right.
back here.
Yeah, but so in 1942 Robeson was like, I'm not doing segregated concerts anymore. And he's like one of the biggest names in music at the time. And so it was like, fuck. Like, so yeah. And he started to, I think he helped. I mean, that didn't stop until it was like literally illegal not to.
Right.
I mean, but he helped with that. And it's around this, it's in the 40s during World War II. He started to be spied on by the FBI.
Oh, good. Our good friends.
Yep. No, so yeah, the FBI starts to spy on him. It didn't help that him and his wife were friends with Nehru because he was a big anti-colonial guy. And it really didn't help that his wife regularly had Soviet diplomats and emissaries over their house for dinner. Like that's
That's
But
ballin'.
that's
so
that's
cool.
rad as hell, though.
That's so
yeah,
cool.
absolutely. There's a story about somehow one of his notebooks got intercepted by the FBI and there was Chinese writing in it and they were like, fuck, because at this point like there was the communists were, obviously the revolution hadn't happened yet, but like the communists were a major force in China,
Right.
even though at this point the US was ostensibly allied with them against Japan.
Sure.
But they just saw Chinese writing. They couldn't read it. The agents couldn't read it. They were just like, this is Chinese. So they brought it back to base or like back to their headquarters. And they had to fucking translate it. And then they realized, oh, he's just like practicing the writing.
Well done.
Okay. Not a problem, I guess. Like, yeah, what kind of like Mickey Mouse intelligence agency you're running here?
You guys have seen Burn After Reading, right?
Yes.
It's like that where it's just like it's like Brad Pitt gets a hold of this like fucking manuscript for like a thing that like some low level FBI dude wrote,
Right.
and it's just like, I've got your shit. Like
It's like, yeah.
they're going to the Russians and like trying to like get money. It's just like that's like the FBI
Yeah.
in the 40s.
Yep. Yeah, it was ridiculous.
Again, like I think because of all of the goofy ass movies that we see where you've got these U.S. intelligence agencies and agents just seem like supermen, right? Where they cannot be harmed and
like they're all James
infallible and they're all
Bond
James
and,
Bond. They're Jason Bourne. They're
Yeah.
fucking whatever.
John Mission Impossible.
John Mission Impossible or whatever. Jack Ryan or,
A lot
anyway.
of J names.
Yeah, a lot of J
Yeah,
names.
John Mission Impossible is his
John
actual
Mission
name.
Impossible is, yeah, for real. Ethan just got like a cackle going there. But I think like you see these and that's what you imagine these FBI agents to be like, but they're like a lot of them are fucking doofuses. Like they're calling you out, FBI. Whatever. I don't know. It like having been infiltrated by the police, I've already seen how bad their intelligence gathering capabilities are. So come at me, FBI.
Well, there was a thing on NPR today that I had heard while I was just driving around, and it was like, oh, how
Taylor
is
listens to NPR.
I do it to just like
No, I
get
understand.
mad. It's just one of those things where I listen to it to just kind of understand what the fuck liberals think because I just can't
Sure.
get into their head.
Yeah.
Like,
No, it's good.
whenever you get somebody who's like, oh yeah, well Ezra Klein said this, or like it's like, can you just shut the fuck up, please? But they were like, it was like, oh, how is the government shutdown affecting certain people? And the first dude was like, yeah, so I was supposed to be joining intelligence in Washington, D.C. and like all this. And it's just like, I took some big steps where like I'm a part of the Coast Guard or, I'm ex-Marine or something. And it's really making it hard to pay rent and this, that, and the other. And I was just like, wow, this dude sounds like a fucking like,
join
he's like the virgin FBI agent versus like the Chad public sector employee. Like,
Oh, fuck.
he's just like crying because his fucking intelligence job is like going down the tubes, and I'm just like, come on, man! Like, are you kidding me?
I worked at a physical therapy office in Reston, Virginia, and there was a CIA agent who came in and he used to call the Secret Service and the FBI rent-a-cops. Hey.
Yikes. Fuck the CIA, though.
Well, I mean, for sure, fuck the CIA, but,
Yeah, so he's spied on by the FBI. So the editor of the Chicago Defender, which was the biggest like black weekly paper in the U.S. at the time, P.L. Prattis, he called Robeson one of the 12 great intellects in the world today. Time magazine called him the most famous living Negro. And so he's giving concerts, like he attracted really diverse audiences and was helping bring together the working class. And so there was, I want to say it was 42 or 43. There was a rash of anti-Jewish sentiment, like some sort of crimes and stuff in Harlem. And so he goes there, he gives a concert in Harlem and makes a point to sing a bunch of like Hebrew songs and talk about like the connection between, he would talk about this a lot, like the connection between like the melodies and the scales of Hebrew traditional music with like Chinese traditional music and all these, like he was really big on trying to emphasize the shared like musical heritage of the world, basically. Wow. Yeah, it was super cool. So in 1943, he plays Othello again on Broadway, and this is literally the first time a black actor has played the role with a white cast. Because you could have an all-black cast, but the way it's written is you've got a white cast and then a black Othello. And so they would normally have a white cast and then a white Othello with fucking blackface.
Right.
Which is... I mean, fuck. So Laurence Olivier, like the famous British actor, he did a film of Othello in blackface in '65. Yeah. Like, I was looking this up recently. I was like, what is the most recent like blackface thing? And then one of our listeners who I follow on Twitter and follows me, he was like, oh, in the BBC, like in the last couple of years, like there've been a couple like sketches that had people in blackface. I was
yeah.
I cannot believe that we're still doing this. Yeah, so anyway, his 46th birthday party is in 1944. Duke Ellington's there, Joe Louis, the boxer, Richard Wright, he wrote a bunch of books, Lillian Hellman's a playwright, Cab Calloway, Walter Houston, the actor, Ed Sullivan. They're all at this fucking party. Henry Wallace, the like Progressive Party like guy, he speaks at this party like talking about how cool Paul Robeson is. He gets public wishes from Babe Ruth and Kwame Nkrumah, who couldn't come to the birthday party. I mean, feel like Babe Ruth was an asshole, but like he was famous. But so, and then Mary McLeod Bethune. She was an educator. She was called the First Lady of the Struggle. Like, she's a huge black civil rights activist. She called him the tallest tree in our forest.
Damn.
Which is a cool way of talking about it. Yeah. And so at this point, earlier, after he got back from Moscow, I this is in the wrong place in my notes, but after he got back from Moscow, he was saying, "From now, I shall sing only for the people. No more concerts for me in England at £1 a seat. The guy who can afford only a shilling has just as much right as anyone else to the entertainment I can give." Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, and so like and that continued is he advocated like he wouldn't do concerts if the prices weren't low to make sure that like the working class couldn't get in. Yeah, and so at this point like he's talking about the purpose of art, like of artists in like ideologically. He says no artist can afford to stand aside in this struggle, for art which fails to reflect the mood of the people is barren art. And so, I mean, yeah, we're gonna do a whole episode on art, but and it's the whole thing. But no, like Robeson was explicit. Like he was like standing communism in his concerts. Like he was saying, Soviet Union, tight as fuck.
America, whack.
Nazi
England,
Germany,
whack.
UK, whack. Soviet Union, tight as fuck. Yeah. And so after the war ends in Europe, he visits the troops, and he wrote that he was shocked by their anti-Negro, pro-German attitude of the troops.
Shit.
Like the U.S. troops, and they were like anti-Soviet and like wanting to, like he was shocked by the troops and the officers. Like he's like, these motherfuckers are racists, and like they helped win the war here, but like they're fucking sympathetic to fascists. Like he was really concerned, as one should be.
Right.
It's not really a narrative that you ever hear a lot. That like I think that there's probably a lot of like accounts out there that talk about like the reactionary ass Americans just like sitting in Berlin, just being like, oh yeah, this was like what's that fucking meme where it's like the person's like, I made this, and like hands it to the person, and that person's like, I made this. Like the Soviet Union won the war, and then the U.S. came in, and like Germany, like Berlin gets split up, and Germany gets split, and they're like, this was us, guys, we did this, and then they just like start like adopting the ideology of the people that they supposedly beat, and it, like there's got to be more accounts out there of like how fucked up that probably was, and like but shit like this obviously gets buried, you know.
Oh yeah,
like,
absolutely.
Paul Robeson's life gets buried, so like his writings about how fucked up it was get buried, and it's like that's really irritating. Fuck.
Yeah. So he got back to the U.S. And he addressed the Joint Anti-Fascist Refugee Committee. He said, "We can't wait for fascism to die out, and the oppressed peoples of the world will not wait." Because he was warning people about fascism spreading to the U.S. He was like, there are people here who want to do fucking fascism. Like, we need to fight. We need to stand up and knock this shit out, nip it in the bud. So in 1946, he's the chair of the council. He becomes the chair of the Council on African Affairs that he helped start. And they start this thing called the Crusade to End Lynching. And so they were demanding like a federal anti-lynching bill. They wanted There was a really big case, and then I don't remember the town, but it was in Georgia. There was a big lynching in Georgia. He said he wanted punishment of everybody involved, like everybody like tangentially involved, and they wanted the exclusion of Klan members from Congress. He was like, if you're in the Klan, like they were saying like, hey,
that's a bridge too far to demand that actively racist assholes can't be in Congress. That's too much.
Right. Well, so now,
it's weird how in a nation founded on capitalist white supremacy.
No, like, but I read that and just like one of their demands, the exclusion of Klan members from Congress. Like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
How is that not already a thing?
Yeah, and so during this crusade, this thing, he publicly was saying like, hey, listen, it's kind of bullshit for the U.S. to be running the Nuremberg trials and indicting race violence when that's happening in the U.S.
Wait.
Like, it's and that's another thing that we don't talk about.
Sure.
Is that like yeah, the U.S. Were like, oh yeah, like the Nazis were bad and they were doing race violence and it was terrible.
Well, but they had a lot of really smart scientists the U.S. wanted to tap and bring over and use. So,
Yeah.
like,
I mean, like, listen, if you're gonna use Nazi scientists, at least do what the Soviet Union did and put them in like a science
In
gulag.
gulags.
No, but yeah, but that's the thing. Yeah, his quote is, "What is happening in Nuremberg is a travesty on democracy when the people of America are murdered by the same kind of men that are on trial."
So
that's
spice.
fiery. Holy
So
shit.
spice.
It's yeah, exactly. It's so true. And so,
Yeah, like if you need any further proof for how little the United States gave a shit about Nazi ideology, it's that the Hearst newspapers were not shut down when he became the exclusive correspondent or exclusive like news organization allowed access to Nazi Germany in terms of like
God.
foreign press.
Yeah.
Like I mean, the dude was a fucking Nazi and nobody gave a shit. I mean, George Herbert Walker was a Nazi. Nobody gave a shit about that. Henry Ford.
yeah.
Like, nobody gives a shit
mean,
about the
Chris-
ideology of fascism.
Was it Franco who like had a column? No, it was Mussolini who had. Didn't he have a
Mussolini.
column in a Hearst newspaper?
He had a column, a regular column in a
Fucking
Hearst
ridiculous.
newspaper. Yeah.
Fucking ridiculous. Yeah, but so he's going on this this crusade to end lynching, and he said. He had a statement. He said, "I heartily endorse the proposal of the Soviet Union to make race discrimination and hatred a crime." And so the Soviet Union, had proposed that in the fledgling like UN.
Sure.
They did that there, and they were like, "Hey, we should make this like a
Should
law
be a thing.
everywhere."
Yeah.
And he was like, "That's awesome." So the NAACP at this point, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, they instructed all their branches, don't associate with this crusade to end lynching.
Jesus Christ.
Because Paul Robeson was one of the leaders on it. And so I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, just Robeson's interaction with the various like civil rights organizations at the time. It was not great, and we got to talk about why. But so... And so, what do you think the FBI thought about this crusade?
I'm sure they were great with it. I imagine Hoover was like, "How can we kill this guy?"
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. So the quote.
Actually, no. First, he probably was like, "How can we discredit this man and
Right.
undermine him? And if we
Well,
can't,
this
then
is
let's
what they
kill him."
tried to do. So the FBI, their official statement said, "This crusade has all the earmarks of another communist attempt to instill racial friction."
If you stop talking about racism, it goes away.
Okay, so the thing about this is like in 2018, with talking about the Russiagate thing, like Russian
Yeah.
hacking the election, I have seen multiple articles talking
Yes.
about how the Russian hackers were trying to instill like
Racial division.
racial division to divide Americans.
Yep.
Yikes.
Exactly. Like in this was literally happening in the 40s,
Yeah.
and it is happening now.
Right, and I think it came down to like 100,000 social media contacts. We're not even talking about like a massive fucking
Exactly.
like
It was like
millions
putting like
and millions.
shitty
We're talking about
like memes,
bad
on Facebook.
memes and trolling Facebook groups and like we're talking about like it's so goofy. Liberals are so dumb.
It's
gullible fuking goofs.
Yeah, it's just rubes. Yeah. So at one point around this time, Robeson, he got in a car accident, and after they were investigating why the car accident happened, it turns out somebody had removed 4 of the 5 bolts on his
Holy
car's
shit.
tire. We never found out who did that, but
The FBI.
I mean, maybe it was either the FBI or white supremacy. Well, I guess those are the same thing.
Yeah. But I repeat myself.
Okay, and so then in April 1949, this is probably one of the most important events in Paul Robeson's life, just in terms of his impact. So there was the Paris Peace Congress. So there was an organization it was after the war. They're like, listen, we just had this world war. It was terrible. We have nuclear bombs now. Those are terrible. It was this organization supported by the Comintern. Was the Comintern still around? So this Paris Peace Congress was endorsed by the Cominform, which is what?
The Comintern was dissolved in 1943 and then basically ran until The common form ran until 1957.
Okay. So yeah, so it was supported by, they were like, yeah, we should not have more world wars. That's terrible.
Sure. Yeah. Seems reasonable.
Western governments, I think the official statement that went out like internally for the State Department, the U.S. State Department, was, we should present this Congress as an instrument of the Kremlin's expansionist foreign policy, a gathering of Russia's fifth columns to undermine the defense of Western Europe.
Okay.
And they started, they were like,
Full support for that.
yeah. So they were like, okay, we're going to start referring to this as the Soviet peace offensive, and they always put peace in quotes to own them.
To own the libs.
Owning libs with quotation marks.
Yeah, but so in 49, it was 3,000 people they gathered to oppose war and nuclear weapons. So the war had ended, the World War had ended, and they were rebuilding Europe. And so their thinking was this is the perfect time to build like a better world, like a peaceful world.
Shocking.
Because they figured rearmament is going to come at the expense of like really important social programs like
No shit.
housing and
Right.
infrastructure. It's going to, yeah. If we're spending money on bombs instead of like social programs, like we're going to be fucked for the next century. Good thing that didn't happen. Sad. No, and so several speakers at this thing.
The Soviet peace offensive. Let's come back to that really quickly, because that's some incredible U.S. propaganda.
I know, right?
Like incredible U.S. propaganda, because the argument is they're going to win through peaceful means, and we can't have that. We won't stand for it.
Right, exactly. If people are gonna be like, "Wow, this communism thing seems great," and that's not gonna work.
Sure.
Ugh, fuck. Yeah, but so several of the speakers condemned NATO, this new thing that formed as NATO. They were like, this just seems like a tool of Western imperialism.
It is.
Whoa.
You were right, Buckaroo.
And then Paul Robeson, he was a surprise speaker and performer. Like he was just listening, and then he was talking to one of his buddies who was going to talk, and they're like, "Come on up here," and they're like, "He's going to give us a speech and he's going to sing." And so it was reported as electrifying the crowd. So he said like he's going to speak on behalf of colonized people everywhere, and he gave this speech about how black and colonized people wanted a life that was more human, and recent Western business investments in Africa would lead to new forms of slavery.
Holy shit.
Wow.
1949.
Damn.
And
Our boy Ropes?
he was the realist.
Dude.
No, and it was and he again said that while it was visiting the Soviet Union for the first time, he felt human. And he said in this speech, the wealth of the US was built on the backs of poor white European immigrants and enslaved Africans who now want a share of that wealth. And we want to fight for peace and not go to war against anyone else. Yeah, and he said, what did he say? An imperialistic war is unthinkable for me and all the black people that I represent. It is unthinkable that we should go to war in the interests of those who've oppressed them for generations against a country that has shown that there's no such thing as a backward people.
Holy shit.
And then he said something to the effect of, never will black Americans wage war against the Soviet Union. We denounce the politics of the American government, which allies itself to the Hitlers and the Goebbelses.
Of course.
Oh, fuck. This is so good.
My man's spicy.
So this got him in a lot of trouble.
No shit.
Of course.
So the news of the speech gets back to the U.S. and the papers are saying, Robeson says black people aren't going to fight the communists. Extra. And everyone starts flipping out. Yeah, exactly. Everyone starts flipping out. And so the black leadership of the time, they were mostly opposed to this. They were like, oh, fuck. Because they felt like they'd worked really hard to get political legitimacy and recognition as like, we're patriotic Americans. And this guy's saying like poor oppressed black people, like we're not going to go to fucking war for some, like against a country that like is trying to like do something better. Yeah. And so the secretary of the NAACP at the time, Walter White, Jesse, we have to cook.
Say my name.
Yeah, I know. He had been friends with Robeson, but like he was like he said in a statement, the overwhelming majority of American Negroes think of themselves as Americans and will respond to the call of their country in time of war. And that got passed around. His second little bit was, this is kind of conditional on white America addressing racial injustice. That part didn't really make it.
Okay.
Of course.
But so basically, So Robeson's income dropped. So in 1947, he made $104,000. In 1950, he made $2,000.
Shit.
Like
Holy
because of
fuck.
boycotts and like fucking racist ass motherfuckers saying like boycotting and doing protests and like making sure that nobody he took a hit. He couldn't.
I would have fucking yeeted my way to the Soviet Union so fast.
Well, just wait.
All right.
You'll see. So, so on July 13th, 1949, the House Un-American Activities Committee, which we're gonna do a whole episode on the Red Scare at some point. So, but we're gonna get part of it here.
We gotta just rip the fuck into Joe McCarthy.
Yeah.
Fuck that guy. No, but so the House Un-American Activities Committee, they have a hearing on, quote, communist attempts to infiltrate, control, and dominate Negro organizations.
Okay.
Because the whole narrative was that like communists are trying to get control through black organizations because black people think that the communists have their best interests in mind.
No shit. I mean, no shit.
Well, but then, like, at the same time, like, do these people legitimately think that, like, black organizations had power at this time? Like that's such a fucking load of shit. I mean, obviously we know that, but it's just like the way that you frame it changes everything.
And so this committee, they were technically, their whole point was to go after, quote, un-American activity. But like pretty much like right off the bat, pretty much anybody who looked at it could see, like looking at who they were indicting, who they were like bringing before them, they could tell they were really focusing on communists and socialists and totally ignoring groups like the Klan.
Right.
Because, well, I mean, in their defense, that's not un-American.
Wait.
So,
It's weird in a nation founded on capitalist white supremacy.
yeah. And so, so the Communist Party, in part, like they were really focusing on this particular hearing about like communist infiltration of black organizations. So the Communist Party in the 20s, 30s, and 40s had been doing a lot of organizing in the South, which is something we need to do an episode on as well. But so this guy Harry Haywood, we can talk about him a ton in a different episode. But like he studied at the International Lenin School in Moscow, and when he got back, he proposed a Black Belt Republic, an autonomous black nation located in the U.S. South. And Stalin was like, Stalin
was like, real shit.
Stalin was like, that's a great solution. Like, that's probably the best solution to the black national question in the U.S.
Sure.
And so, like, the Communist Party they drew up like a map, like this is where it would be. And so, the committee, they got a copy of that and they printed it and they handed it out to everybody. Like, look, this is what they're trying to carve up the U.S. So they brought this guy named Alvin Stokes, who anytime there was someone talking about communism, they would bring this guy. He was like a black guy who used to be in the communists, and then he made a ton of money and like prestige being a former communist and testifying against communists. Like that was his job, basically.
There's a lot of money in that.
Yeah.
There
yeah.
is
I'm
quite a bit of
feeling
money.
like maybe I should.
And so
You can't cash in if I do.
yeah, so he testified that Robeson is spouting the Kremlin line here. And he said he pointed to a survey that said in 7 U.S. cities, more than half of the white people in those cities thought that black people were mostly communists.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, and he's got these ridiculous quotes like, Mr. Robeson was the first to smear the historical loyalty of the Negro people since the Revolutionary War. And then my favorite one is he said Paul Robeson is he's a fucking communist. He said, quote, he's
He
desirous.
said he was a fucking communist.
What?
He said he was a fucking communist.
No, he didn't. But that's my editorializing. But direct quote, he said Paul Robeson is desirous of becoming the Black Stalin.
Full
Nice.
support. Full
Black
support for the
Stalin
Black
is
Stalin.
like a cool.
Right up
Black
there.
We got Mexican
Mexican
Stalin.
Yeah.
We need a Black Stalin.
Right up there.
Absolutely. And then the big thing that happened was they brought in Jackie Robinson. Jackie Robinson was the first black guy to play Major League Baseball, and they brought him in to testify about the loyalty of black Americans. And so he said in his quote, he was like in his testimony, his deposition, he was like, me and most other black folks, he said, quote, we have too much invested in the welfare of the United States to throw it away because of a siren song sung in bass, referring to Robeson.
Ooh.
Ouch.
Yeah, and he said, but here's the thing. Here's another thing he said that didn't get quoted. He said, the fact that it is a communist who denounces injustice in the courts, police brutality, and lynching when it happens doesn't change the truth of its charge. Just because communists kick up a big fuss over racial discrimination when it suits their purposes, Buh. A lot of people try to pretend that the whole issue is a creation of communist imagination, but they're not fooling anyone with this type of pretense, and talk about communists stirring up Negroes to protest only makes present misunderstanding worse than ever. Negroes were stirred up long before there was a communist party, and they'll stay stirred up after the party's disappeared, unless Jim Crow's disappeared by then as well. So the media congratulated Robinson for speaking against Robeson, but they barely reported him condemning Jim Crow.
Right.
Which, shocking, right? So the New York Times article on this hearing, they were like, oh, listen, U.S. democracy is going to make sure that the black struggle against racism would be won without help from false, self-serving communist support.
And here we are in 2019.
Yup.
Racism is over, y'all.
We did it.
Everybody,
Good
ladies
job,
and
American
gentlemen,
democracy.
we got him.
I thought I had it all together.
And so, yeah, so so in 1963, Malcolm X wrote, I don't know if it was like a newspaper or something. It was like a public thing to Jackie Robinson. He said, quote, "You let yourself be used by the whites, even in those days, against your own kind. You let them sick you on Paul Robeson. You let your white boss send you before a hearing to dispute and condemn Paul Robeson because he had these guilty American whites frightened silly."
Damn.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and then in Robinson's autobiography near the end of his life, which was like the late 60s or 70s, he said, "If they invited me to testify like that, now I would reject such an invitation." He said, "I have grown wiser and closer to painful truths about America's destructiveness, and I do have increased respect for Paul Robeson."
Nice.
So, yeah. He
Well, you
said,
fucked it up at the time. God damn it.
yeah. Yeah, there was wild stuff at this hearing. There were, like, Robeson, he got grilled about his ties to Russia because he knew so much Russian, like his kid was in school in Russia. And they were like, "Russia's where communism started." And he was like, he was like, "No, it didn't. Communism started in England, you idiots." And it's an outgrowth. It's an outgrowth of industrialization. It's not, in fact, it's not just a purely Russian thing. Like, it's a global movement. He said, quote, "I don't think my communist comrades have as much allegiance to Russia as certain Americans seem to have today to fascist Greece or Turkey or Albania."
Damn.
Wow, dude.
Spicy.
And then they were like, "Well, what about the human rights violations in the Soviet Union?" Literally. And he
No
said,
shit.
And he said, "The Soviets haven't liquidated nearly as many people as Negroes were liquidated in slavery or in many parts of the South."
Wah. So what you're saying is that that modern day anarchists and left comms basically have the same line as the House Un-American Activities Committee? Is that what you're telling me right now?
Literally, though.
Holy shit.
Wait till the next one. So, no, and so one of the people grilling him, he said, "Mr. Robeson, do you know that the largest Communist Party club in Winston-Salem is named the Paul Robeson Club?" And he's on record. He says, "No, I didn't, but I am mighty proud to hear about it. Thank you."
Fuck yeah.
So good. Fuck.
Yeah, and they were like, "Are you communist?" He's like, "No, I'm not part of the Communist Party. I'm in the Friends of the Soviet Union, though." So, yeah, so anyway, he got a bunch of his concerts canceled after the Paris remarks. It was often as a result of veteran groups like the Veterans of Foreign Wars and the American Legion.
Oh, yeah.
Hooray.
Good people.
Still around today.
Yeah, no,
Yes, they
the Foreign Legion were like at UCCS a couple months ago, and they tried to stop me to be like, "Hey, would you like to join?" No,
We're like, "Death to America."
I was like, "Death to America." No, I was just like, and then walked on.
One of LaCroix.
Then I threw a LaCroix at their head.
Nice.
Hell yeah.
Praxis.
Lacromianism.
I'm a LaCrominist.
Amazing. Yeah, so after this thing, in summer 1949, in Peekskill, New York, there was going to be a fundraiser for the Civil Rights Congress, and Robeson and Pete Seeger were going to perform at this thing.
Nice.
So the local newspaper started to publish scare pieces, basically. They were like, "He's a, quote, avowed disciple of Soviet Russia." They reprinted the Black Stalin remarks. They reprinted Jackie Robinson. They're trying to get all the white folks.
What year was this, by the way?
49.
49, okay.
Yeah. And they said, Fuck. The editorial in the local paper was like, Peekskill wants no rallies that support iron curtains, concentration camps, blockades, and NKVDs, no matter how masterful the decor or how sweet the music.
Can we like put that article on the Seeing Red or under the pick on a dad episode?
We
maybe?
should. The same issue, they published a letter from I didn't get his name, but his position was the Americanism chairman of a local American Legion post.
Okay.
And he called not just for a boycott, but a demonstration to, quote, leave no doubt in their minds that they're unwelcome, referring to Robeson and his fans.
Oh, it was the American Legion, not the Foreign Legion.
Yeah.
That
There's the they're veterans of foreign wars and the American Legion.
it was the American Legion
yeah,
were the
cool.
ones that I shit on at UCCS.
So August 27th, when the concert is, a bunch of veterans, like 1,000 like people riled up by the veterans groups, they reached the concert site and they blocked most people from entering the concert. And they like attacked the concert goers with rocks and bats. They were shouting like racial and anti-Semitic slurs. They burned a cross right next to the venue.
Holy shit.
And so Robeson,
Fuck the troops.
like they were driving up and they saw what was going on. And Robeson was like, "Let me out!" Like he said, "Let me out of the car. I want to go talk to them." And like his friends physically had to keep him in the car. They were like, "Don't go out. You're gonna fucking die, dude."
Right.
So he didn't. And so yeah, he went back to New York. So the concert was canceled. But there were local unions and
Why
progressive.
didn't they just debate him in the marketplace of ideas? Is my question.
So, oh my god. So, a bunch of local unions and progressive organizations, they invited Robeson back. They were like, "Fuck this. We're not gonna do this." So they, so this thing was happening on the grounds of like these like a couple of rich folks who had some land. They were like, "Yeah, you use our land for the concert."
Nice.
And so the
Critical
union
support for random rich people.
Yeah. And so the unions, they posted union men. They slept. So as soon as they announced we're going to have the concert here again, they posted union men 24 hours a day to protect these people's land from like
Shit.
random assholes coming up to. So that's some motherfucking solidarity. So September 4th was the redo. So there were 2,500 union members protecting the concert venue, and then like 1,000 or so protesters lined the roads, and they were shouting things like, the quotes were like, "Go back to Russia, go back to Jew York City." Yeah. And so during and after the concert, there was a big riot with, and then the police got involved. Guess which side they were fighting on?
Oh, I'm sure it was the side of the union workers and the black Americans who wanted to.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
100%.
That's the side the
Yup.
cops were on, right?
Ooh.
Right?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
Yep. 200 people were injured. All the veterans and protesters were like destroying cars and like throwing rocks at people. So there were investigations into what happened. The governor of New York gave a press conference. He asked the DA to conduct a special investigation, but he also said in the press conference, "I think the disorders were provoked deliberately by the communist sympathizers of Mr. Robeson." And then and there are pictures of the time like people like I saw a picture of a guy with a sign. It said, "Wake up, America. Peekskill did." Because and then the grand jury that investigated, they said Peekskill, like this whole incident, it was used by the Communist Party as a proving ground to test its machinery for mobilizing its forces, manipulating public opinion, and more important, for rehearsing its strong armed forces, the shock troops of a revolutionary force which is controlled by a foreign power and committed to methods and ultimate ends incompatible with our constitutional system.
This is just fucking Russiagate bullshit back then.
It's the
Like
same
this
shit.
Is,
Yeah,
it's
same
the
shit.
same fucking shit.
Just recycling the same messages.
So after this happened, the Soviets put a statue of Paul Robeson on a mountain in Kyrgyzia, which is now Kyrgyzstan.
Shit.
I don't know if it's still there, but
We should go visit it.
if it is, fuck yeah,
go visit
in
it.
Kyrgyzstan. Yeah, so things were like, some people remarked that this was like the worst they'd ever seen race relations because of Paul Robeson. Like one person was like, "I've never seen such unbridled hatred for black people because of Paul Robeson, like daring
it's the black
to
person's
talk."
fault for
Exactly,
talking,
exactly,
speaking
right?
out, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so 1951, the Civil Rights Congress, they publish a petition called "We Charge Genocide," the historic petition to the UN for relief from a crime of the U.S. government against the Negro people. Basically saying, like, bringing to the UN had So in 48, the UN adopt the Convention of Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. And so this petition, they were like, okay, fuck, if you recognize a genocide thing, the government did that to black people.
Right.
And so the petition
The government
accused...
did that to Native people.
Yeah, the U.S. government did that to
How
a
is
lot of
that
people.
not a thing?
So they accused...
I mean, I know why, because
Yeah,
the
you
U.S.
know
is on
why.
the Security Council, and you
Yeah.
can't fucking do shit without.
Right.
Yeah.
So the U.S. this petition accused the U.S. government of genocide of black people through like denial of justice, of people murdering black people, preventing civil rights, trying to destroy like the culture and like family lines of black people, removing voting rights. Yeah. So the problem is by now Paul Robeson had his passport. He couldn't get his passport renewed after the stuff in 49. So he couldn't present it to the committee. There was a committee in Paris that was having this. So he went to New York. He went to the New York UN location at the same time as William Patterson, this communist guy who was the chairman of the Civil Rights Congress. He went to Paris to present to the Secretary General and the President of the General Assembly this petition. So the State Department sent 2 black delegates to Paris at the same time to like counter program, be like, actually, that's great for black people in the U.S. We love it.
Yikes.
And the NAACP at this time helped the State Department. They published The Negro in American Life. I think it was a magazine or a book. It had a like positive and progressive narrative about black history since emancipation. So the NAACP was collaborating with the State Department. It's bad. I was just reading this stuff and I was like, fuck, it's bad. So the FBI followed Patterson to Paris, and they confronted him. And the embassy in Paris, they said, "Give us your fucking passport." And he was like I think they sent him a letter, or no, I'm trying to remember the story. Like I think he heard word they were gonna come like demand his passport, so he just like packed up and went to Hungary, and then went to Czechoslovakia. And then eventually he made it to the UK, where they did finally catch up to him. They detained him and they sent him to New York. When he got there, his passport was seized. So the petition, "We charge genocide," was never debated by the General Assembly.
Fuck. Of course.
Even if it had, like,
Nothing
when
would
one of the
happen.
members of the Security Council, you had 4 or 3 members of the Security Council, like, because it was U.S., Britain, France, right? And then China and...
No,
but it was
Soviet
still
Union.
Soviet Union. No, it was still Taiwan at this point, though. They didn't recognize the PRC
Yeah, they didn't recognize
until
it
like the fucking
until the
60s,
70s.
70s.
60s or 70s,
Yeah,
yeah.
It was later, so they wouldn't have been able to do anything anyway.
No.
Yeah, but so the government had taken Robeson's passport so that he wouldn't criticize U.S. policy abroad, and they told him, they're like, listen, if you make a statement that you're going to refrain from criticizing the treatment of Negro Americans and the American government's foreign policy during your travels abroad, you can have your passport. And he was like, no.
Hell no.
He was like, I'm not gonna agree to that.
Right.
It's like, fuck that. So 1950, Robeson sues Dean Acheson, the Secretary of State, for depriving him of his constitutional right of freedom of speech and to own and procure property, because by not being able to travel abroad, he couldn't make his living as a singer. So he's like,
Sure.
all right, these are capitalist rules. Like, fine. Hey, you're denying me my property rights. You're violating the NAP.
Yeah.
And so then 1951, a court upholds the State Department. Robeson appeals. 1952, a court says, so basically, like they said, what Secretary of State Acheson says, that's his business. We can't really control what he says as a private individual.
What?
Right, exactly. As if he doesn't have authority
Right.
in a government position. They're just like, he's just saying things like, well, I don't know.
I'm just asking questions.
Yeah, and they did this court. Yeah, exactly. This court described Robeson as a quote political meddler. And so it was based on so it's the Internal Security Act of 1950, and it says in this. So the parts of this act are still in effect in 2019, but
Okay.
at this point, it said Americans who participate in the world communist movement are effectively discounting themselves as Americans. They repudiate their allegiance to the U.S. and, in effect, transfer their allegiance to the foreign country in which is vested the direction and control of the world communist movement.
Hell yeah.
And so
You'll get no argument from me.
And so basically, it required communist organizations to register with the Attorney General. It banned members of those registered organizations from applying for or renewing a passport. So in 1952, Robeson was awarded the Stalin Peace Prize, and he applied for a passport so he could go to the ceremony in Moscow to receive it. It was denied, as you might imagine. So in 1952, after the Canadian government stopped letting Robeson into the country, he was on his way to Vancouver to do a concert, and they stopped him. Where did you live in Canada?
Vancouver.
Fuck. Fuck Canada.
Fuck Canada.
Death to Canada.
Death to Canada. Honestly, Canada sucks.
So in Seattle, he went to the National Union of Marine Cooks and Stewards office, and he did his speech and songs over the phone. They hooked the phone in the Vancouver, for 2,000 people in this Vancouver place. They hooked it up to the loudspeakers there.
Must have sounded like a remote Rev Left episode.
Holy shit.
Sorry, Brett.
We love you.
We do love you.
But mail your guests a microphone.
Yeah, for real.
May 18th, right afterwards. So there's a public space that on the Canadian-U.S. border. It still exists. It's called the Peace Arch Park.
Okay.
It's just a big park that's part of both countries. Do you know about this?
Oh, I've walked it multiple times.
Cool.
Man, getting visas is fucking wild. And getting visas renewed and stuff, and it's fucking intense. And border guards are dicks.
So
I've been to the Peace Arch.
Is it cool?
You can still walk around. It's nice. It's
all right.
on. It's not necessarily on the Pacific Ocean because Vancouver Island blocks off Vancouver
Sure.
as a city and that kind of part of the Lower Mainland. So you there's inlets and shit, but it's essentially the Pacific Ocean. So it's
Nice.
right there. There's this beautiful green park. There's an American flag and a Canadian flag, and then it's just a giant white Peace Arch, and it's oh yeah, here we go.
Of course, it's white.
it's a symbol of peace.
But yeah, I would drive down there when I was getting my new visas, depending on what I was doing.
Nice.
And I would just walk around. You could hop over the border and just walk between the two. It was kind of fun.
Yeah, so Robeson, he was like, all right, I'm gonna give a concert at the Peace Arch Park, and so there were 40,000 people in the park, and Canadians on one side, Americans.
Dude, it's not that big. That's wild.
Yeah, Canadians on one side, Americans on the other side, and he was always on the American side, so he was well within his rights.
That's a really small park. 40,000.
They crammed 40,000 people in there somehow.
Wild.
Yeah, no U.S. papers covered this concert.
Of course not.
And then he had a similar concert for the next 3 summers, so it was a recurring thing. Yeah. So in 1955. The State Department said you can go to places that don't require a passport, which at this point was Canada, Mexico, and then a few other U.S. territories. You didn't need a passport to go there. So in 1956, Robeson, he gave a sold-out concert in Toronto, which was his first non-U.S. concert since 1950 because he hadn't been able to leave the fucking country since 1950.
Right.
And then he was like, I'm going to do a Canadian tour. I got to get the fuck out of the U.S. I'll do a Canadian tour. But then the next month, the Canadian government said that he couldn't come back into Canada. So
Probably at the behest of the FBI
well, of course,
or the U.S. State Department.
So then, 1956, we have the major. Fuck this. There's just so many quotes. It's another House Un-American Activities Committee hearing where about his passport. He was like, "Why the fuck you got to give me my fucking passport?"
Oh, but aren't we free in America? Can't we go anywhere we want, unlike those dirty communist countries that don't let them go anywhere?
And so he asked about his passport, and they were like, well, did you sign the affidavit saying you're not a communist? And he said, quote, under no conditions would I think of signing any such affidavit. It is a complete contradiction of the rights of American citizens. And so, Robeson was one of the few. So the whole thing, we'll talk about this in the Red Scare episode, but one of the whole things with the House, these House indictments and these hearings is that most people just kind of they denied that they were communists because they didn't want to get blacklisted. I mean, they ended up getting blacklisted anyway, but they weren't. They kind of went along with it. Robeson was one of the few he basically went in and was just like, man, fuck you guys. I'm not giving you shit. Yeah. And so they were like, are you a member of the Communist Party? And his quote, you can read the transcript. It's fucking bomb. I mean, I'm going to read like half of it here just because it's so amazing. They were like, are you part of the Communist Party? And he said, what do you mean by the Communist Party? As far as I know, it's a legal party like the Republican or Democratic Party. Do you mean a party of people that have sacrificed for my people and for all Americans and workers that they can live in dignity? Do you mean that party?
Oh, fuck.
And they were like, are you a member of the Communist Party? He said, do you want to come into the ballot box when I vote and take out the ballot and look? Yeah, and so it's just going through this whole thing, and he's saying, gentlemen, wherever I've been in the world, Scandinavia, England, many places, the first to die in the struggle against fascism were the communists. And I have laid many wreaths on the graves of communists.
Shit.
Holy fuck.
Yeah. So then, yeah, his fucking... There was a play in the 70s that used a lot of the transcripts of Robeson's hearing, but it was performed by James Earl Jones.
Oh, okay.
And there's a recording of this, and he's one of the only people who can, like... who has the same kind of
deep voice,
resonant, the just beautiful voice. And so when I'm saying the quotes, I may just overlay the
audio
clips from that because
yeah.
it sounds so fucking cool.
That's awesome.
So he says, in his statement, he said,
The reason I'm here today, from the mouth of the State Department itself, is I should not be allowed to travel because I have struggled for the independence of the colonial peoples of Africa. The other reason I'm here today, again, from the State Department and from the record of the Court of Appeals, is that when I am abroad, I speak out against injustices against the Negro people in this land. That is why I'm here. I'm not being tried for whether I'm a communist. I'm being tried for fighting for the rights of my people, who are still second-class citizens in this country, in this United States of America. My mother was born in your state, and my mother was a Quaker. My ancestors, in the time of Washington, baked bread for George Washington's troops when they crossed the Delaware. My father was a slave. I stand here struggling for the rights of my people to be full citizens in this country. And we are not. We are not in Mississippi. We are not in Montgomery, Alabama. We are not in Washington. We are nowhere. And that is why I'm here today. You want to shut up every Negro who has the courage to stand up and fight for the rights of his people, for the rights of workers. And I have been on many a picket line for the steel workers too. And that is why I'm here today.
Shit.
yeah. And so, yeah, and he's saying, and he says in the transcript to the House, like the House committee, he says, in Russia, I felt for the first time like a full human being. No color prejudice like in Mississippi, no color prejudice like in Washington.
Right.
It was the first time I felt like a human being, where I did not feel the pressure of color as I feel in this committee today.
Nice.
Yeah. And then they said, and then one of the guys was like, why don't you just stay in Russia? Why don't you move to Venezuela?
Yeah.
He said, why don't you stay in Russia? And Robeson says, because my father was a slave and my people died to build this country, and I'm gonna stay here and have a part of it, just like you. And no fascist-minded people will drive me from it. Is that clear? I am for peace with the Soviet Union, and I am for peace with China, and I am not for peace or friendship with the fascist Franco, and I am not for peace with the fascist Nazi Germans. I am for peace with decent people.
Damn.
And so another thing that happens is they keep asking about so this is a couple years after Khrushchev has taken over and he's done his secret speech.
Right.
They're explicitly referencing Khrushchev. They're like, what about these things that Khrushchev has said about Stalin? Like, you still support Stalin? And he said, whatever's happened, and he keeps redirecting it, which is great. He said, whatever happened to Stalin, gentlemen, that's a question for the Soviet Union, and I'm not going to argue with a representative of the people who, in building America, wasted 60 to 100 million lives of my people, black people drawn from Africa on the plantations. You were responsible, and your forebears, for 60 million to 100 million black people dying in the slave ships and on the plantations. Don't ask me about anybody, please.
Holy fucking shit.
Yeah, no, he was going, like, he pulled both barrels on these people. And then this other guy, he says, I'm glad you called our attention to the slave problem. While you were in Soviet Russia, did you ask them there to show you the slave labor camps? And then the other guy says, you've been so greatly interested in the slaves, I think you would want to see that. Yeah. And he says, so Robeson, he literally says, the slaves I see are still in a kind of semi-serfdom. I am interested in the place I am in the country that can do something about it. as far as I know about the slave camps in the Soviet Union, they were fascist prisoners who'd murdered millions of the Jewish people and who would have wiped out millions of the Negro people could they have gotten a hold of them. That's all I know about that.
Fucking face.
Yeah.
In your fucking face.
so
Also,
good.
again, the maximum sentence in a gulag was 10 years. The max.
Even for fucking fascists.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and so he says, tell us whether or not you've changed your opinion in the recent past about Stalin. And he says, I've told you, mister, that I would not discuss anything with the people who've murdered 60 million of my people, and I will not discuss Stalin with you. And he's saying, you would not, of course, discuss with us the slave labor camps in Soviet Russia. And Robeson says, I will discuss Stalin when I'm among the Russian people someday singing for them. I'll discuss it there.
Nice.
Wow.
Yeah. So
What a guy.
So that's the thing. He kept
Wow.
redirecting. They were like, "Well, what about the 100 Guerrillian people that Stalin killed?" And he was like, "You're gonna talk about these hypothetical people Stalin killed when America's murdered fucking hundreds of millions of black people?
Right.
Fuck off." And so afterwards, they tried to hold him in contempt of court, but like they were looking at it and like technically he'd answered all the questions, and contempt is mostly for not answering
Sure.
questions. So they were like, "Well, fuck." Yeah. So, but
We don't got him.
he still didn't get his passport back though. So May 1957, he sang from a studio in New York, and it was transmitted across the Atlantic to London, where there was a Welsh choir that was like backing him up over.
Holy shit.
Yeah, yeah. And he did this a couple times. Like he was the first one to do this kind of remote singing. He did like
pretty
remote
rad.
conferences with people in the UK, because everyone in the a bunch of people in the UK were like organizing to there were like Paul Robeson societies, like committee for the something of Paul Robeson. Like there were people in the UK was like, we fucking love Paul Robeson. Like
Yeah. Let him come back.
US, let him come back. Yeah. So October 57, he does an interview with Ebony magazine. I mean, it still exists. At that point, it was kind of like a black focused Life magazine. And so this is a fucking great interview. He was like, the interviewer was like, are you working for the black masses or the red comrades? And he said, I'm not part of any international conspiracy. All I ever said or did was in the interest of freeing my people.
Nice.
And so he talks about the like absurdity of these white oppressors, like the Senator William Eastland was one guy, asking their victims to fight the USSR when the USSR's army was the only thing protecting the self-determination of these like former colonies in Africa and Asia.
Nice.
Like this guy had better foreign policy than like people now, and we have like the benefit of history.
Yeah.
And like and he got it then, and now we have all these fucking people who are so just blinded by it's just decades of propaganda. I get it, but like you got to see through that
Like
shit.
how
man.
how do you keep swallowing
You got to
US
see
propaganda?
through that shit. Yeah.
How?
Yeah. And so they basically wanted him to come over because they were really trying to protect like the image of the US in the post-war era. Like they would only give passports not like to people who they knew were going to represent like the US very well. And so Robeson in this interview he said they can keep me from going overseas, but they can't keep news of Emmett Till and Autherine Lucy from going over.
Shit.
And Autherine Lucy, if you're not familiar, she was expelled from the She was expelled from the University of Alabama after a federal court said the university needed to provide adequate protection for her to go to school after
Right.
integration, and the university was like, "Okay, she's expelled,"
Right.
so they wouldn't have to do it. But
Yeah.
and then Emmett Till obviously was a young.
And like every
Young
time
black
somebody
boy.
puts up a memorial for Emmett Till, some fucking asshole shoots like shotgun,
Yeah.
like blasts at it. And the woman that accused him of rape has recently said that she
She made it up.
made it up. And
She's not dead.
Yeah,
not
she's still
dead.
fucking.
She's
She's
still
still fucking alive.
she's not in jail. She didn't get like all these fucking like MRAs, these men's rights activists are not like, oh, arrest her, throw her in prison for accusing this young
This
man
is
of
false rape
because
accusation.
they're
Yeah.
all
They
because
don't
they're all
give a
they don't
shit
give a shit
'cause he was
about black
black.
men.
Yeah, exactly. And not even men. He was
He's a
like
child.
14
He was, yeah.
or something.
yeah.
Yeah, it's
I think he was
ridiculous.
13.
Oh fuck yeah! No,
He was a young fucking
boy.
child,
He was a
yes.
child. Yeah. So, and then the
It's weird how a nation founded on capitalist white supremacy can
Christ.
still
fucking
be this way.
hell. Yeah.
To America.
Yep.
Death to America.
So in this 1957 interview, he says, or the interview concludes, Robeson is sure that the day will come when American Negroes will find that black power holds the key to their freedom.
Okay.
In 57.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, it's wild. So April 1958, the Supreme Court rules that people can't have their passports taken without due process. So Robeson's lawyer's like, yeet, and gets him his passport back. After 8 years, he couldn't leave the country. Yeah, and so
Well, now that Stalin was dead and Khrushchev was in charge, they didn't give a shit anymore about anyone going to visit the Soviet Union or standing for it.
Well, so May 1958, he had performances at Carnegie Hall, sold out, 3 encores. He was like, fuck, that was sold out. Let's do another one 2 weeks. Sold that one out.
Shit.
Like, yeah. He flew to London in July, and there was there was a National Paul Robeson Committee, and so he went to the UK. He gave several packed concerts. He went on TV and did concerts. He went to Moscow. He went on TV there. He sang in the Lenin Sports Stadium. He sang to an audience of 18,000 people.
Oh my god.
He had dinner with Khrushchev.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
critical support for Khrushchev.
He's in charge of fucking Soviet Union.
We've had this conversation before because like we hate Khrushchev and we hate Gorbachev, but like
he's better than motherfucking Eisenhower.
Better than Eisenhower, better than Reagan, like better
Everybody
than
else,
Yeltsin. Like
yeah, exactly.
They were at least claiming communism and attempting to, they had shitty lines, but
yeah. So so Robeson and his wife, they suffered from this punishing schedule. They were just traveling all over the place, and so they actually spent a couple months in and out of Soviet hospitals.
Holy shit!
When they were in Moscow, they were getting Soviet medical care.
They were probably poisoned by the ghost of Stalin because
he had dinner with Khrushchev.
Yeah.
And then April through November 1959, Robeson played Othello again in the Stratford-on-Avon, the birthplace of William Shakespeare, their Shakespeare Memorial Theater's 100th season. He played Othello. It was like the biggest thing in the fucking world. It was wild. 1960, he like trotted the entire globe. Like he went to Moscow, he went to 32 cities in the UK, he went to East Berlin, Spain, Belgium, France, Hungary, Australia, New Zealand. Like he went all over the fucking world doing concerts and talking about black liberation in the United States. And he never gave up on the he never gave up his stance on civil rights. So 1960, he's trotting the world. But 1961, he developed really severe depression. And so he stayed in a private psych hospital. I think it was in the UK through 1961, 1962. They gave him like 50 ECT treatments, which is electroconvulsive therapy. They still do that.
Yeah, they do.
But it used to be like
it used to be extremely intense, and they've recently discovered that it actually does work for people with bipolar disorder, but in much lower doses than they were doing in this time frame, where it was like literal, like fucking, like they would put leads like with like metal rods with like bulbs on the end, and they would just touch it to the side of your head like a fucking electric chair or some shit. It was unreal.
Yeah. So he had at least 50 of those, and he was on really heavy drugs, just totally sedated. And like, but nothing was getting better because obviously not. Like, I mean, if you're a vegetable getting electrocuted, So at one point they went to a clinic in East Berlin. His wife took him to a clinic in East Berlin in the German Democratic Republic. He stayed
forthcoming.
Yeah, he stayed for 4 months. No drugs or ECT. His health improved radically.
Nice.
And he returned home within 4 months.
Nice.
So then 1962, he's 64 years old. They said, hey, you got to sign an affidavit. He was trying to renew his passport. And they were like, you got to sign an affidavit saying you're not a communist. And he was like, I'm old. I'm tired. He signed the affidavit.
Yeah.
So, and then... but yeah, he was still going around like I think he performed Othello in the 60s at one point.
Shit.
He was still singing. In December 1965, Eslander Robeson died. I mean, and they'd been married for fucking 40, almost 50 years. And so 66, Paul Robeson, he moved to his sister Marion's house in Philadelphia, and he never performed in public again. And then he died on January 23rd, 1976.
Shit.
Wow.
So yeah, and I guess the main thing to take away with Paul Robeson is that he was for decades one of the most famous people in the fucking world,
Right.
and nobody knows who he is now,
Right.
because he was a communist, because they tried to destroy him.
Yeah.
They tried to bury him, and I mean they have kind of. There's a lot of his recordings are on they're on Spotify, they're on YouTube. Like you can listen to his music. It's beautiful. Like you can see some of his movies, but like he was uncompromising. He was laying the groundwork for civil rights.
Right.
Before, so like 1966 he disappears kind of from public life. The 60s, that was right after like the US civil rights movement was popping off.
63
Exactly,
and on,
yeah.
yeah.
And so but it wouldn't have happened if not for Paul Robeson, and he laid the groundwork. He was publicly talking about the plight of black people in the US for decades, his entire life, talking about what the United States had historically done and was currently doing to black people, not just in the U.S. but also all over the world. Like
Right.
the plight of colonized, oppressed people everywhere. He did go to Australia. He met up with the indigenous folks there, the Aboriginal folks there. He was going all over the world. Like he was well loved. He was loved in China. He was loved, India. He was loved in like all over Africa, all over South America. Like he was a global celebrity, and nobody knows who he is now.
Right.
So, but we need to remember him. We have to bear witness to
and
Paul
like,
Robeson.
So like think about other actors, American actors from that time and place. Like think about Jimmy Stewart, like a fervent Republican dickhead. Like just like you've got like some really good Jimmy Stewart movies. I like Smith Goes to Washington. Like as much as American Democracy's fucked up, like
it's a good movie.
it's a good movie, and
Great
like
It's a
movie.
Wonderful
like,
Life.
It's a Wonderful Life.
It's a very good
Harvey, fucking
Vertigo,
Classic.
I mean,
Vertigo,
like,
yeah,
so
fuck,
many
he's in
good
classics,
films,
yeah, absolutely.
And like, yeah, he was a good actor, but he stood for so much bullshit,
Exactly.
and to this day, people were like, "Oh yeah, Jimmy Stewart, old Jimmy Stewart," or like, think about like
John Wayne.
John Wayne.
Wayne.
John Wayne was a fucking coward. The dude got
He was a
deferment.
Nazi.
He was a Nazi, and he got
Yeah,
deferment
he's a
from fucking
fucking fash.
fighting. He was a fascist piece of shit. But we talk about like, oh, this American hero. Clint Eastwood is alive to this fucking day, and
Right.
I love the Man with No
Oh,
Name
God,
trilogy.
yes, yeah.
His
A
act-
Fistful
like,
of
his
Dollars, a few
movies,
dollars more. Like
in the 60s and 70s,
so
legendary.
good,
The
so
Good,
good.
the Bad,
Like
and the
Sergio
Ugly,
Leone
yeah.
made some of the best movies of that era.
Even like
but
Dirty
he's a
Harry
piece
and
of shit.
He fucking sucks.
The dude sat in a fucking chair and talked to an invisible person in another chair about like libertarian
and
bullshit.
he directed
Like,
American Sniper. Like a like
It's
yeah.
just like we still talk about these fuckers that did absolutely nothing with their lives besides cash checks from the American public for fucking movies and didn't do anything to actively like improve the world around them, and we remember them, and they're
Exactly.
still alive. They still get to like live their fucking
Yeah.
great lives.
And
It's
Paul
bullshit.
Paul Robeson, he was an artist, he was a musician and an actor, but he was using his art to spread socialism, to spread awareness of the plight of colonial people, but not just colonized people, but the plight of workers everywhere. Like he was
Yeah.
explicitly claiming these things, and they tried to crush him, and like they didn't while he was alive. I mean, they kind of did, but now, yeah, history, and so that's why it's so important. We got to remember Paul Robeson. He was so important, one of the most important figures of the 20th century
Yeah.
in the United States, specifically for the civil rights movement, for sure, but also
Yeah.
just for global politics. Like, yeah, we have to spread the
Yeah.
word about him. I cannot emphasize enough how important this man was. Like what
Sure.
a powerful comrade, what a powerful advocate for the oppressed and the working class everywhere.
And all of this goes back to what we talked about in Dad, the most recent Dad episode, and then also the history of history episode. In that, like, it can seem so easy, fellow comrades, to like fall into this trap where the people that you're talking to seem to think that you're some fucking conspiracy theorist, and like you're
Right.
like, oh yeah, they tried to bury him and they're doing all this fucked up shit, but they did, and it's
it's
not.
a public record.
It,
Yes.
it is in public record, and then you get these guys that are just like, "Oh, why is your evidence so much more important than my evidence?" And it's like it's about the processes with which you get to your conclusion,
Right.
as much so, if not more so, than your like not necessarily your sources, but like trying to defend your sources. Obviously, there are physical records out there that will show and prove and absolve these things that you are trying to defend, and I know that you're trying to defend, and we're trying to defend. But it's the processes with which you go through to get to that point that American hegemonic capitalist culture doesn't allow you to get across to people that you're talking to. Liberals don't want to go through these processes because it's traumatic. We've talked about this so many times. Like, the move into a communist headspace is incredibly traumatic.
Sure. Absolutely.
And you've gone through that, or you're going through that, and you have to come to terms with that. And when you're talking to people that don't beat yourself up over it, but understand that, like, this is fucked up. The fact that we don't remember figures like this is historical revisionism to the tune of capitalist, white supremacist bullshit. And that's the hard part to, like, really come to terms with. And, like, we have to work our way around that, because otherwise, like, we like, this is why history is so important. This is why, like, dipshit leftcoms and anarchists that, like, refuse to fucking put the work in to understand these issues from the ground up are not leftists. They're not your comrades. They're not people that, like, deserve your time, because history is important in every context that we're talking about it in.
Well, and how many people know that there was a petition brought before the UN charging genocide against black people by the U.S. government? Who knows that? Very few people know that. And, like, but that's we should that should be everywhere. Like, everyone, that should be common knowledge. Everyone should know that. And it was Paul Robeson who helped do that. And so
I don't know, like, coming back to the trauma of sort of letting go. Like, I think when you grow up and you're taught particular things about who you are and the place you come from, and, you know, where you live now and what it was like before, and like, you get this picture in your head of how things are and how things ought to be within that framework, and it's extremely it is traumatic for that to be broken down for you. Like, and I'm gonna draw, like, a weird parallel here. When I stopped believing in God, because I was raised as, like, an evangelical Christian, well, sort of like non-denominational in my early years, and then my mom got attached to Woodman Valley Chapel.
Oh my God.
And
real shit.
Yeah, real shit.
Wait.
I didn't go there,
My
but my
family
grandma
was like,
did.
I grew up in that church.
Nice. Okay, so
Christ.
same team.
Same team.
Same team. So it didn't happen immediately. It was kind of a process. Like, at first it was sort of like, well, maybe God is still there, but maybe he isn't like a guy in the sky with a white beard, shit like that. But eventually I was sort of like, but why did I come to believe this? It was because I was told it, and not based on any sort of, like, factual whatever. But when I sort of was like, I don't think there's a God, it was scary. I mean, it was terrifying at first. It was like, I didn't like it. It was such a deep seated, like, heavy part of who I was and had been for my whole life. And so we're talking about my early 20s, like mid 20s, I think, when I was finally like, I don't think there is a God.
5 or 6 years ago.
5 or 6 years ago. Yeah. I wish. It was traumatic, and it was scary. And I think, to a lesser degree, politics is the same. When you grow up in the United States and you are taught it's the Democrats versus the Republicans, and the Democrats are the left wing and the Republicans are the right wing, and that's it. And this Overton window is so fucking small. And when you are like, holy shit, there's this whole other world, I think initially your brain wants to reject that, or to build this fucking goofy ass horseshoe theory nonsense, because that absolves you from having to look at the world in a different way, because it's scary. Like, it's not easy. And so if you're in that place, like, listening to this, and you're like, well, I consider myself to be a liberal, and I think communists are extremists, the same as fascists and whatever horseshoe theory nonsense. Like, I understand where you're coming from. I don't think that you are, I don't know how to phrase this. Like, I don't think you are wrong because you're wrong. Like I don't think like within your own headspace that the rejection of this ideology that we're trying to sort of impart or that we're trying to like bring out of people. Like I get where you're coming from, but you have to understand that so much of what you have learned is built on the foundation of the place in which we live. And again, as I've repeatedly joked about in this episode, the foundation of this country is white supremacist. It is anti-indigenous. It is anti-black. It is pro-white supremacy. It is pro-colonialism, settler colonialism, imperialism. All of that is at the root. So when some sort of propaganda comes out from the U.S. State Department or any of its fucking mouthpieces, it is built upon that foundation, and you have to understand that. You have to grasp that before you can even begin to analyze why this information looks the way it is when it's imparted to us.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I don't know how. That was good. Claps. I don't know.
Oh, were you gonna say?
You know what? I was just gonna say go to the next segment if we want to.
Yeah, no, we should because there's some good questions. No, but just real quick. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, when you think about, it's just so hard to realize that that you've been lied to,
Right.
And you were just saying this. Like, it's just so hard to realize you've been lied to
Your whole
life,
Yeah.
and by people who don't even know that they're lying to you.
Right.
That's
right.
the hardest.
I mean, that was the whole point of our like history of history
Exactly,
episode.
and so that's why you've got. So I mean, this is something I wish we talked about in the history of history episode, but like, and I guess we did a little bit with these people like conspiracy theorists or like flat earthers. I was thinking
Sure.
about these a lot. People understand, like a lot of people understand on a deep level that something's not right
Something is wrong.
with the narrative that we're given about the world is. And then people latch onto kind of really weird things because honestly, for some people, it's easier to believe in a flat earth than it is to believe that
the U.S. sucks.
that the United States like is a white supremacist organization that has committed genocide against all kinds of people groups and continues to do so.
Well, like,
Yes.
look at the way that like they frame people like Paul Robeson and people that are advocating for change. I mean, even before the Cold War. So obviously, we talked about the HUAC has been around since the 30s, or was at its height in the 30s. And you get these people that are saying, "Oh, well, like you're a part of this terrorist organization, or you're a part of this organization that's doing this or X, or you know." But like in all of American history, or at least the history of the 20th and 21st century so far, how many Americans on American soil have been killed by communists?
Right.
How many Americans have been killed by cops?
Right.
Like here's the thing: is that like
There's no
there's
House Cop Committee.
right like
How many Americans have been killed by communists? Talk shit and it'll be one more.
But like that's it comes down to things as simple as that. And I know that there are these liberal types that take lines that are so similar to their most hated ally, the American conservative, but they, cops are just doing their jobs or this, that, and the other. But it's like it's that hegemony. It's that it's been ingrained for so long. It's been built off of these ideas that have never left. And like that's.
You don't have to actively force an ideology on people if it has become so pervasive that
Right.
everyone just accepts it as the norm.
I mean, isn't that what was it Gramsci who wrote about hegemony? Isn't that
Yeah,
what his
it's Gramsci.
definition
Yeah,
of it was?
base and superstructure.
Once it becomes so
It's like
pervasive
self-reinforcing.
that it self-reinforces and you no longer have to push it on people. Like in the early days of capitalism, violence had to be imposed upon
Right.
people to create that order. But now
But
that
now
it
violence will be done to people opposing it.
Yeah,
Sure,
That's the beginning of
sure.
primitive accumulation. You have to start with like policing of the people, and
Yeah.
then you have people self-governing themselves.
yeah, it's and I know everyone likes
Fuck
to shit on
Foucault.
Foucault, but that's his like the panopticon shit. Like everyone is watching everyone else, and so you no longer have to force it on anyone.
Yep.
Isn't it crazy how
Isn't it-
our minds are essentially prisons?
Yeah. Isn't it strange?
You gotta
how
kill the cop
prisons
inside your head.
resembles, Yeah.
We
Kill the
live
cop inside your head.
in a prison society.
Gang weed.
Another
gang
prison
weed.
system. Another
Slonking
prison
that gang
system.
weed.
Another prison system for you and me to live in.
So with that, I want to kind of make a full circle, and when you get to a place of trauma, you also need to have a form of care with that. I feel
Yeah.
like Paul Robeson was trying to do that with drawing from that you need to take care of your people. You also need to draw out the injustices that's happen to your people, and also have like an international coalition with that. Both him and also the Black Panthers did this pretty frequently. That's what makes you a valid organization, is having international ties, which is founded on anti-colonialism and imperialism. But that's just my hot take.
The spiciest.
So, I mean, I'm
Sipping
just
that
saying, take care of your people.
I'm gonna start calling you Silent Ezra, like
Yeah.
Silent Bob.
Nice.
You hardly ever speak, but when you do,
you
it's
do,
always like profound.
Swag.
So
I'm for that shit. Okay, so the next segment of the show is what we call Poll the Proles, where we take questions from listeners and do our best to answer them on air.
we haven't done this one in a while.
No, it's been a minute.
I miss it.
Our episodes are always so fucking long.
I know.
It's you can't.
The
you
nuclear episode, we were like, we're not doing any other segments. This shit's like 5.5 hours long.
But you can't shortchange the truth.
You can't use nuclear weapons. You can't. Here's the thing.
So you can-
Here's the thing. We can't use nuclear
Call the
weapons.
fuck out.
Okay, so
Pull the pearls.
Sad.
so first question.
Can we use nuclear weapons?
No.
We can't use. Here's the thing. We can't use nuclear weapons.
No, but here's the thing.
Even you.
I'm sorry.
At 2, Ezra.
First question by Ingle Dingle is, can you look at his university experience? I'm curious if there are any names worth mentioning that he learned from, so that we may get a chance to see what he had to deal with studying in London, England.
I mean, that's an interesting question. So I don't know necessarily who he studied under or who he read when he was in London. Like I said earlier, he was studying it was like they called it Oriental and African Studies or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know who he was specifically reading. I know that his university experience in the United States, he started at NYU and then he had to leave because it was too racist.
Right.
So he went to Columbia because he was at the NYU Law School and he was like, it's just too racist.
I'm sure Columbia was free of racism too.
Well, I mean, at least Columbia's right there in Harlem. I'm sure
Fair.
it was very racist, but he made it. No, so yeah, I don't really know. It's hard to try and figure out who his
Mentors.
who his
or-
mentor
yeah.
who was you reading? Paul Robeson, for significant periods of his life, he was reading 7 books a week.
Jesus.
He was so. Who did he read? I'm assuming everybody.
He read Marx. He read Lenin.
Yeah, he read Stalin. No, but yeah, and he was reading. Yeah, so he read everything. So I don't actually have the answer to that. All I know is that he was, when he was studying at the University of London, the African Studies, he was talking to a lot of anti-colonial leaders,
Sure.
like Nkrumah, he was talking to Nehru. He was talking to all of these. So yeah, I don't know who he was necessarily studying under, but I know that he was having personal relationships with a lot
Right.
of these anti-colonial
Yeah,
people
yeah, yeah.
who wrote things. So
Nice.
Valid. Okay, next question. Comrade Icepick asks, how much can be found on his father? Of course, the episode is about him, but I imagine his father being a runaway slave is important to his political development.
yeah, no, I mean it absolutely was. I mean, we have a decent amount of information about his father actually, because his father was a minister for like a decently sized church. I think it was in Princeton, which his father was removed from his position because of some conflicts with the white donors who were funding the church.
Surprise.
Yeah, shocking, right? No, but so like we know a decent amount about his dad. He has and his family. He was saying that. So his father was actually famous amongst the black community in Princeton for being like a powerful advocate for black rights, like for standing up. So yeah, his father was a huge influence on him. And the fact that his father was a slave, like was born a slave, it was enormous. The fact that like that was an example, like a firsthand example of the plight of black people in the U.S. Like that his father was like fucking enslaved when he was born. So. Yeah, but I mean, there's a decent amount. Yeah, William Drew Robeson. His dad has a Wikipedia page. Yeah, I mean, there's a decent amount of information on him if you're interested. So, and the books, some of the books I'm gonna put in the show notes there's information about his parents and his dad specifically.
Cool. Okay, so next question, Barcoder Reader asks, I'm really interested in how towards the end of his life in the 60s, mental health treatment was used to basically destroy him. We often hear about abuse of psychiatry in the USSR, but from what I know, when he was hospitalized in London, they just pumped him full of drugs and shock therapy without any face-to-face contact with psychologists.
Yeah, no, I mean, exactly. And we were kind of talking about this with ECT. I mean, I don't know if it was necessarily like a conscious decision to silence him or destroy him, but like I think that the history of mental health and like mental health treatment in the West specifically has always been terrible. Like it's never been good. So I think he was victim to. I think that was a common thing, honestly. Just like we're gonna shock the fuck out of you. We're gonna pump you full of drugs. Like fuck. I mean, a lot of people have seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest from the 70s, where there's just a lot of like people in these wards, like all wearing white. They're pumped full of drugs, and like some people are just kind of like vegetative in these sort of prison-like wards. That was super common, and I mean, we still have mental health facilities where they do resemble prisons. No, but like, I don't. So based on my experience, I don't think what happened to Robeson was like an exception. I think that was like a normal thing for people in the 60s and 70s, and I mean, still now.
But that's the thing, is that like it comes back to that like subterfuge around information concerning. The way that they treated psychiatric patients in the USSR was evil, and like Western nations did it so much better. And that's, it didn't have to be actively.
Which is bullshit.
What?
Which is bullshit, of course.
Right. Well, it didn't have to be actively targeting him as a communist or this important figure on the left. It was just the fact that like it was bad.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Like it was able to control him and silence him, not because it was him specifically, just by the nature of the psychiatric system of the West.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Real shit.
Next question by Bob Tross. One, do you think
Like
his
Bob Tross.
Bobatrosh?
We're gonna paint some happy revolutions.
Oh, I didn't think about that.
Bob Tross.
Nice. Bob Tross, one, do you think his football career affected his health near the end of his life?
I don't know. I mean, what were
It's
you
got to
saying
be a
about
tough question. But
Yeah,
like,
there's
so
no way to
like
know
they
for sure.
didn't wear significant padding. They
just
wore
had, like,
leather
these
helmets.
shitty leather helmets. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and so like
So-
all the research got into like TBIs and stuff, traumatic brain injuries with football and stuff like that. Like,
Yeah. I mean, like,
he didn't play that long though.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
I'm gonna say that probably white supremacy had a higher
Sure.
toll on his fucking health. Like that's the thing. Like the social conditions under which you live have a huge impact on you.
absolutely.
Like the reason that I mean, like we tend to examine health issues as being a part of the individual behavior of the people who have those health issues without examining how the society under which we live impacts our health. and not just in what foods are available to us readily and but also like what sort of attitude the rest of the world has toward us as individual people or as a particular class of people. And so I'm like, as a white man, I'm not going to be able to have a qualified stance on what the black experience is, but it's certainly not on the same level as white people. And so that must wear on a person.
Absolutely. But also, fuck US football. Like, we know
Sure.
enough, like it should be banned. Like, we know enough about it, how much it damages people. The only reason it still continues is because a lot of people like it and it makes some people a lot of money. Fuck US football.
You mean the non-profit organization, the NFL?
Oh my God.
Literally, the
No, I know.
yeah.
It's absurd.
NGO NFL.
It's ridiculous. Yeah, where you have fucking like F-22s flying over your fucking
Right.
stadium. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
What
Fuck
was
US
it? Like,
football.
there was
Fuck
something
American
that they
football.
were supposed to be taxed on something, or like something was like there was more money that was going to be drawn out of them based on it was like 5 or 6 years ago, and they decided, oh well, we're not going to disclose that. Oh, it was how much their CEOs, like how much
Yeah.
the higher ups got paid in the organization.
The executives.
They were told to release that information
Because
and they said,
as nonprofits, they are required to.
well, they weren't even a nonprofit at that point.
Oh, they weren't?
No, they jumped to it. They said, "Cool, we'll take a hit on this, on certain things, to move to a nonprofit
status.
so that we don't have to let you know how much our higher ups make."
I thought you did have to disclose that as a nonprofit.
I think that there's loopholes, and like
Maybe.
they changed their status for the sake of
Specifically, so
not
they-
releasing
okay.
information on how much money is made.
I think you have to disclose different information. Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know.
The nonprofit system in the U.S. is
It's goofy.
ridiculous. It's stupid.
Obviously,
But
if
also
the
just, like-
NFL can qualify as a nonprofit,
So
something
dumb.
is broken.
So dumb. No, but to answer this question specifically, I mean, like in the teens and 20s when Robeson was playing football, like no one knew.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, they didn't. They were wearing really like. They may as well have not been wearing helmets.
Sure.
But nobody knew how bad it was. Like, yeah, we know now how bad it is, and we still do it. So, fuck U.S. football. I'm just gonna say that again. Fuck American football.
America.
Death to American football.
Death to American football.
Including that
Whoa.
album. I hate that shitty
Whoa!
album.
Don't say death to American football. Holy shit.
For them, yeah.
Cap and Jazz is
Band.
the better
Get out of here.
Kinsella band.
Before this evolves, the same person asks, and this is the last question: why would civil rights leaders ask him to denounce communism? And was it necessary to denounce communism to reach a broader white audience, or was it political, like the split between Demsocs and MLs?
That's
big question.
super narrow, and it gets way
Then
broad.
it gets very broad.
We'll just start with the first one.
Yeah, okay.
Liberalism is a hell of a drug. Let's just begin there.
No, so like, yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, the various like black organizations like the NAACP, they were explicitly condemning Robeson when he was saying like oppressed people aren't going to fight for like a colonizer, and their whole thing was that like, fuck, we've been fighting to gain legitimacy in the existing system, and so we can't have him destroying that. So like the reason that they condemned him was because they were seeking recognition by the like capitalist
Yeah.
white supremacist state. Like they wanted recognition and didn't acknowledge or couldn't acknowledge, didn't acknowledge that it is a white supremacist system, and it was a white supremacist system, and it was never going to lead to liberation. It cannot. Like
Right.
it is categorically unable to lead to liberation
Right.
because it is built on white supremacy. It is built on the oppression of the working class.
Whenever there is like an adjustment toward liberation, there's always a backlash that undermines it. Like the Reconstruction era of the United States was huge. It ended up being co-opted by a bunch of white people who basically moved in and were like, we're going to rebuild the South. And then that was ultimately undermined by Jim Crow. And then you had the civil rights movement, which, desegregated schools, but then new laws were passed to keep schools segregated in terms of like busing and closing schools and basically funding and restructuring things so that now, like currently in 2019, schools are almost as segregated as they were prior to segregation. They are now more segregated than they were at any point, with the exception of prior to segregation, because they have reordered the system in such a way that this segregation still exists, even if on paper it doesn't. So white supremacy will always find a fucking way.
Yeah.
Like, it has to be smashed. It has to be utterly destroyed, and it won't be destroyed until capitalism is destroyed.
Exactly. Like, that's the thing, is like, in order to seek liberation for oppressed people, for colonized people, you have to just, like, you cannot reform the system because the bones are rotten. Like, the poison is deep within it.
It's weird how a nation founded on white supremacy.
The white supremacy is coming from inside the nation.
Nice.
Yes, indeed.
So I think that's why that's why the civil rights leaders at the time, that's why they were condemning him, was because they were seeking,
They were hoping that they
were
could
hoping
change.
for a
Yeah.
legitimate they were hoping for recognition through the system. But
Yeah.
like
Exactly.
I
And
think
it happens
even
over and over.
I
and
know, it gets
over.
co-opted.
It's so
It's
frustrating. Like you discussed it on the feminism episode.
Well, yeah.
You know, we're talking about it now with civil rights. Like, there's always this, like, well, if we compromise enough with these fuckers, we'll get what we want, and it never
Listen,
fucking
it
happens.
still happens in leftist spaces
Yes.
when someone calls you out for being a traitor to the LGBTQ community and you're for not accepting like white bullshit. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
gonna sit here and be like, oh no, it's okay if we revise a couple. This is getting too specific. Angry me is getting so angry, but like it's just exactly what
Yeah,
you're
it still
saying.
happens. If we compromise enough to the right, that eventually the right will move to the left, and it never works that way. Never fucking works that
yeah,
way.
if you move enough to the right, then the center moves to the right, and we keep moving to the right,
Right.
and then
you must destroy the system. It
Exactly.
must be fucking crushed.
there is no compromise.
Thank you so much to Ethan for coming on tonight to talk to us about Paul Robeson. Thank you so much to everyone for listening. Some suggested readings will be in the show notes. Our sponsors are all of our excellent fans on Patreon, some of whose names have been changed so they are good when the crackdown happens. And they go.
So many names.
We
Okay.
won't keep doing this.
We won't keep
We're gonna
doing
figure
this.
out
I
a new
know.
way, but this is the last time.
This is the last time, and of course it's me. A nice smooth mouthfield, Aaron, Bravovich, Asox, Adrian, Alex, other Alex, third Alex, Alexa Play Despacito, Alice, Anna, Anthony, Arturo, Banan, Barcode Reader, Benjamin, Bennett, BDEF, Bill, Brandon, the other Brandon, Brendan, Brock, Brian, Cage433, Caleb, Cameron, Casey, other Casey, Kat, Caesar, Chase, Sharon, I think, Christoph, Clayton, Kami Party Hats, nice, Commissar Taco, Commissarus Rex, Comrade Benj, Comrade Ice Pick, Comrade Red Robin, Dan, other Dan, Daniel, Danny, David, Don, Dean, other Dean, Diego, Donald, Dylan, Eat Jeff Bezos.
Yes.
Eric, other Eric, Ethan, not that one. Ethan, still no.
Damn.
Ewan, Felix, Florine, Francis, our filthy comrade. Garrett, Grant, Greg, other Greg, Jeremy, Hyder's cult of personality. Hudson, hidden file. Ewan, J. Bones, J. Martel, J.H. Wolf, J.W., Jace, Jake, Jacob, Jake, other Jake, James, other James, the third James, Janet, Jarl Marks, Jason, Juddy, David, Jem, Jeremiah, Jesse, other Jesse, Jocelyn, John, Johnny, Joey Stalinovich, Josh, other Josh, the gay one, Joshua, other Joshua, the third Joshua, Justice Dab, Justin, not that one, other Justin, still not that one, the third Justin,
Damn.
Kinsey, Kieran, Liam, Lightning, Linus, Liz, Logan, Magnus, Mark, Marlin, Marshall, Martin, Massimo, Matthew, other Matthew, the third Matthew, Mattia, Mexican Solidarity.
Hell yeah.
Michael, Mike, Mitchell, Mobin, Morgan, Nathan, Nicholas, Pablo, Paul, other Paul, Peter, other Peter, Petter, Phillips, Proletariat Marx, Quinton, Radio Blur, Raphael, Rain, Randall, Real Joe Rogan, Reed, Revolutionary Left Radio,
Nice.
Rick.
Shit on him.
I know, it feels
It was just a little gentle ripping.
That's true.
valid critiques.
It comes from love.
Yeah.
It does.
Aaron Hornets, Russian Posadas, Ryan, Sabat Kitty, Sajid, Sal, Samuel, Sebastian, Sel, Sean, Jesus Christ, Silver, Wyatt, Tadishi, Talia, Talking Socks, the Cardinal Cadre, the Proletariat, Thomas, Tim, Tina, Thalman, TVVVV, an ironic Stalinist, Vincent, Violet, Virginia, Walter, William, and Zachary. Fuck yeah. All these people are heroes of the revolution and make it so much easier for us to make this podcast for you. Please don't forget to rate and review on your favorite podcast app. Like us on Facebook.com/ProlesPod and follow us on Twitter at ProlesPod.
Prolespod.prolespod.
Just
Hell yeah.
follow us at ProlesPod.
Should reserve that URL. Prolespod.prolespod.
Nice. If you have any feedback, topic ideas, or suggestions, feel free to send us an email at prolespod@gmail.com. Thanks for tuning in. Solidarity forever. Okay, that's it.
There's an old man called Mississippi. That's the old man that I'd like to be. What does he care if the world's got troubles? What does he care if the land ain't free? Old Man River, that old man River, he must know something, but don't say nothing. He just keeps rolling, he keeps on rolling along. He don't plant taters, he don't plant cotton, and damn that planter is soon forgotten. But old man River, he just keeps rolling along. You and me, we sweat and strain, body all aching and wrecked with pain. Tote that barge, lift that bale, get a little drunk, and your land's in jail. I get weary and sick of trying. I'm tired of living and scared of dying. But old man River, he just keeps rolling along. Let me go away from the Mississippi. Let me go away from the white man boss. Show me that stream called the River Jordan. That's the old stream that I longs to cross. Old man River, that old man River, he must know something, but don't say nothing. He just keeps rolling, he keeps on rolling. Long old river forever keeps rolling on. He don't plant cotton, and then that platinum is soon forgotten. But old man River, he just keeps rolling. that barge and lift that bale. We gets a little drunk and we lands in jail.